Irish.
You were muted.
Thanks. Welcome, IB Nation. Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That guy over there is Brian Driscoll, and we are back. And it is Friday, and it is a Friday free-for-all mailbag. It is the day that you guys run the show, and we just answer your questions and queries. And it's fun. I love it. I love myself some Friday show. That's for sure. So, Brian, how you doing today on a wonderful Friday?
I'm good, man. You're messing with my rhythm here, changing spots and sounds and stuff. So I'm gonna have to adapt a little bit.
On location, but I brought my flag, so the location is Irish Breakdown. So
yes, that's the key.
We're good.
That's the key. It's home is where the heart is, right? Well, the office is where the flag is.
That's
baby.
Right.
Okay,
100%.
That's where we're at. But no, I'm ready to go, man. Normally we have like in the 30s when the show starts. So I have, sometimes in the 40s, but we have 50 questions start already. So you know what that means, Vince?
Epic long show.
Well, it means number one, our fans are locked and loaded, right?
Well,
and number two, this is going to be a good show.
Yeah.
So
we're ticking off, man. Like it's going to be here before you know it. Like it's never soon enough, but it's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah. Let's roll.
Andy Milton fan, would you provide your thoughts on the current state of the Notre Dame program? A state of the union, so to speak.
I mean, you really think we're going to be able to do that in a question to a show? You know what I mean? Like,
that's like a 2-hour speech.
It's a whole show by itself, my man. I'll give you a really brief answer. And, that's kind of, I kind of feel like I get where he's coming from on this, but I kind of feel like, isn't every show we do kind of something like that, like on whatever topic we're talking about? But, I did a bit of a state of the program breakdown a couple months ago during the off season. And really where it comes down to is, look, the program's headed in a good direction. Are they there yet? No, they're not, but they're definitely going in a good direction. You talk about the recruiting improvements that we've seen from the program. Defensively, they've added a ton of talent the last few years. Offenses, we're disappointed in what the 25 class looks like. They're struggling at receiver right now, and the running back class is solid, but not what recent classes have been. And then, of course, there's all the drama surrounding Deuce Knight at quarterback, and that's that has some folks kind of in their feelings and feeling a certain way about certain things. But you're also coming off of what is probably the best offensive class Notre Dame has signed in 20 years. With the only class that might be in the same ballpark might be that 2008 class that had like Dane Christ at quarterback and Michael Floyd and Deion Walker and John Goodman and those I think Jonas Gray was the running back in that class. This offensive line class I think was better than that one, but that's the only one that can really contend with it. And that class provided Kyle Rudolph, that provided Notre Dame with some big time players, and so they're trending in a very good direction, and the school is doing its part a lot more than it has been, working with them in some areas, spending more money, being willing to invest in the program in ways that maybe they weren't as willing to do in the past, and embracing the changes of the college football landscape. I was very concerned that Notre Dame was just going to kind of be like, nope, we're not even going to go down that road. Instead, they've said, look, we'll go down that road. We're going to go down that road a certain way that we're comfortable with, but we're going to go down that road because that's the laws now. And so I think a lot of those things are positives. They're building a 9-figure new football facility that's just going to be for football players and athletes outside of the eating facility, which will kind of be for everybody. But it's in a good direction. Now we need to find out if the on-field product can kind of catch up to what the other part is. That's going to be the big key. Is can they win games in a way that matches what they're kind of doing off the field? That's going to be the question.
Yeah, they definitely stepped up from a off the field aspect, and paying coaches, facilities, the indoor facility is unbelievable. I think that the admissions department is also working with the football team as well. I mean, they're still not just letting anybody in, obviously, but I think that there is more of a give and take there to a degree. I think that, to a degree, right? I think that there's a better working relationship between the team and the university all around.
Like there's right ways and wrong ways to work with them, right? The right way is, hey, listen, we'll work with you on maybe allowing you to get Riley Leonard in as a transfer, even though he's not a graduate.
Right.
Long as you bring us a kid that's academically has thrived, and Riley has,
Exactly. I mean, that's why they're bringing in guys from like Northwestern and Duke, and like you can get those kids in as underclassmen. I mean, even all the way back, I guess, to a Alohi Gilman, because he was an underclassman coming from Navy.
Here's an example of a change that's happened at Notre Dame. They're not changing their standards of letting kids in, but one thing they've done is they've expedited certain processes to say, hey, look, we'll get this feedback on this kid 6 months sooner than we normally did, so that way he has time to put in the work to get into school. So like in the past, a guy like Bronte Johnson never would have got the early feedback he got that says, this is kind of where you are, this is what you need to do, we'll work with you, and not in regard to we're going to lower our standards, but we'll make very clear, Bronte, if you want to get to Notre Dame, this is what you need to do. You've got to do the work, but here's the work to do. And then, Notre Dame, you've got to recruit kids that are going to do the work. And Bronte did. There's a defensive end in the 25 class that people thought Notre Dame was going to get. He didn't want to do the work, so he's not in the class. There's another kid in this class that needed to do some work, and he did it, and now he's in the class. And so those are things they're doing. So it's not about lowering the standards, which is not necessarily what you were saying, Vince. It's more of saying, hey, we'll work with you if you promise to bring us quality kids. And that's the kind of thing. And now it's up to the football staff to say, hey, look, you better make some smart decisions about the kind of kid that you're going to bring in front of our admissions office, not from an academic standpoint, but just per se, but you better have a lot of faith that this kid is going to go out there and do things the right way. Because if you start bringing us kids that are coming here and they're getting in trouble and they're not doing what they need to do and they're struggling academically, and all of a sudden all these kids that we worked with you on are leaving and not doing well, guess what? We may not be as willing to work with you next time. And the football staff so far has been doing what they need to do. So it's those type of things, Vince, that you're seeing a lot more of. I was told this by someone, and I think I'm comfortable relaying this because I'm not revealing the name and I won't say the circumstance, but there was a meeting that this person I know was a part of a meeting with some higher ups at Notre Dame. And for the first time in a long time, the statement was made that when the football program is good, it's good for the entire school. And it wasn't a statement saying like, hey, we're going to sell our souls for football championships. It was more of we're going to stay true to who we are, but that doesn't mean we can't support the football program. If we are talking about we're the best, Notre Dame's always striving to be the best, then shouldn't we strive to be the best in everything we do, especially knowing the ramifications of what a good football program will do for the rest? Hey, dean of whatever school, you want a few $100,000 extra to hire a few more extra professors, then you better get on your knees, head over to the grotto, light some candles, make sure you're at the Basilica every Tuesday morning praying that the football team is good this year, because that's where the revenue is going to come from for us to be able to expand your department, because of how much the football, when the football program's bringing in money, that affects the entire institution. And there's more of a recognition of that. Now, there has also been very clear directions to the football program. There's a right way and a wrong way to go out and about winning. And we need you guys to focus on the right way. And fortunately for them, they have a head coach at Notre Dame that already believed that anyway. So there was like, no, I guess I'll suck it up and deal with it. It's more of like, yeah, exactly. That's how I want the program to be anyway. So we're on the same page. And so, those are all things, Vince, that you look at and say, for the first time in a very long time, the vast majority of the leadership at Notre Dame is all pointed in the right direction. And willingly so. Like, I kind of feel like the leadership prior to this, and I'm not talking about Jack Swarbrick, I'm talking about other leadership. Even when they were on board, it was kind of like they were dragged on board, where now it's like, hey, this is what we need to do, right? We're all on board. This is the direction we got to go, man. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes from.
It really is amazing the ripple effect that a really good football team does for a school. And I'm not even just talking college. It's the high school level too. You see attendance rates go up. You see grades go up. I mean, you see obviously school spirit, like that kind of a thing go up, and I'm talking high school, but also college. And then to your point, there have been studies that have been done for schools that have really good football teams. Applications go up by students that want to attend that university. You know what I mean? And I'm referring to like schools that maybe aren't perennial winners. You know what I mean? Maybe they have a year where they're just really, really good. That following year, applications go up. I mean, it really is, a ripple effect between one and the other. And so, there's no doubt that if you open your eyes, if you're an administrator of the school, if you open your eyes and realize what a positive effect that athletics can have on your school from a financial standpoint, from an application standpoint. And I realize Notre Dame's not hurting for kids applying to their school. That's not what I'm necessarily saying.
For them, it has more to do with donations.
Yeah, 100%.
But Vince, it does impact it though, because maybe some kids that might otherwise choose to go to a Northwestern or something like that may say, "Hey, man, I went to that I visited campus the weekend of that Notre Dame versus whoever game, and that place was lit. I mean, I get a great education there, man, but there's a lot of school spirit there. Kids like that stuff." And
it makes a difference.
It's funny, talk about, depending on the program, because you go 11-2 at some schools and it's like you think you'd won a championship, even though you didn't. Go 11-2 at Bama, and people are like depressed. Do we need to move on from the current coach that we have now?
Yeah, exactly.
So it is kind of funny how that is. But no, I mean, look, the program it's in a healthy place. It's in a good direction, but it's not there yet. And it's not going to happen overnight. Now, what's going to happen on the football field this season is going to have a big impact on that, in my opinion. And that's what makes this a very important season. There's no doubt.
Muhammad Abdi, Brian, toughest Notre Dame schedule since the Lou Holtz era and easiest with the benefit of hindsight, 86 to the present.
Oh, boy.
That's a lot of years going through schedules, man. Well,
yeah.
And it's also
a real tough one.
While you are researching, it's also difficult because perception of a schedule going into a season and then perception of a schedule after the season is over are two different things.
What I like from his question, though, is he answers that in his question. He says, with the benefit of hindsight. So meaning like looking back, saying what were the toughest schedules that Notre Dame faced. I think that's kind of a good place to be. Look, it's going to come down to this, and I've got to kind of think through which one I want to go with. But I think the 2017 schedule was really tough and very challenging. Now, we didn't know it was going to be that tough, to your point, Vince, kind of going in, because Georgia was coming off of an 8-5 year. Well, they ended up being a team that played for the college football championship that year, lost in overtime. Michigan State was coming off of a 3-9 season. They went 10-3 and finished in the top 15. So, Miami was a team that was not as good the year before, and they ended up being a top 10 team. So, there's a lot of different things that go into it. Miami was actually 9-4, and if you remember correctly, Miami was one of the few teams that Notre Dame beat in 2016, right? That really bad 4-18. Well, one of their wins was a win over Miami. And so then the next year, obviously, Miami got a little bit of payback. But that 2017 schedule was tough because Georgia ended up being a top 10 team. Michigan State ended up being a top 15 team that season. You faced USC, who was a really good team that year. NC State was a really good team that year. Miami was a really good team that year. Stanford was a really good team that year. And then, of course, the bowl game, you played LSU. So looking at the records, Georgia finished the year ranked second in the polls. Michigan State ranked 15th in the polls. USC ranked 12th. And this is final polls. NC State ranked 23rd in the final polls. Stanford ranked 20th in the final polls. And Miami ranked, let's see here, 13th in the final poll. That's who they played that year. And then let's see, 1, 2, 3 of those games were on the road for Notre Dame. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a pretty challenging schedule for Notre Dame that year. The other one that I've always thought, looking back, and again, there's others you could consider, and I'd be curious what the chat thinks about this, because I thought Bob Davie, as much as I dislike Bob Davie and think he was not a very good football coach, Bob Davie had some brutal schedules at times in his career. I mean, he had some really tough schedules at times in his career, and I kind of always felt a little bit bad for him. But he had a couple that I thought were especially challenging, Vince, and you got to kind of pick which one you want. One of them was the 2000 schedule. They started that season off against Texas A&M. This is their schedule that year, Vince. Right? This is just, I'm not even going to say started with. I'm just going to give it to you in order: Texas A&M, Nebraska, Purdue, at Michigan State, Stanford, Navy, at West Virginia, Air Force, Boston College, at Rutgers, at USC. Like, that was their schedule that year. Now, I don't think that one ended up being as tough. Nebraska ended up ranked 8th that year. Purdue ranked 13th that year. Some of those teams kind of fell off. Air Force did not finish ranked, but they were 9-3 that season. So there were some decent teams on that schedule. I thought the 1999 schedule was pretty tough, Vince. They started off with Kansas, who wasn't good, but then they had to play at number 7 Michigan. Yeah, they had to play at Purdue, and I believe that was in the middle of the Joe Tiller era, right? So, that was obviously a good time. I think it was the year after, or it might have been Drew Brees' last year, maybe the year after Drew Brees. So you look at that team. Michigan finished that year ranked 5th in the final polls. They had to play Oklahoma that year. They had to play USC that year. They had to play at Tennessee. In 1999, if you remember correctly, that was a really good Tennessee team. They were the defending national champions. They finished 9th that year, and so like that schedule was pretty tough. But I've always felt the toughest Bob Davie schedule was the 97 schedule. That's the one that I've always kind of felt was like the 99 schedule or the 98 schedule when they had that one good year that ended up not being a really tough schedule. But the 98 schedule, Vince, they played Georgia Tech. They played Purdue, at Purdue, Michigan State, at Michigan, at Stanford, who was ranked when they played, at Pitt, home against USC. They played Boston College at home, Navy at home, at number 11 LSU, home against number 22 West Virginia, at Hawaii. And in the bowl game, they had to get a rematch against LSU, who they beat on the road that season. Then they had to play a rematch in Louisiana in a bowl game. So that was a pretty tough schedule.
LSU, basically. Yeah.
Georgia Tech finished that year ranked 25th. Purdue finished that year ranked 15th. Michigan State finished 7-5. Michigan won the national championship that season, if you remember correctly. That 97 season, Stanford ended up falling back, but they were good when they played. They had to obviously play Pitt team who had a 500 record. USC had a winning record that year. LSU finished the year 13th, and you had to play them twice. And then, of course, like I said, West Virginia was ranked when they played them as well. So that was a really tough schedule. I'd say probably 17 and 97, in my opinion, were probably the two toughest. That's debatable. There's some others that can kind of share their opinions and thoughts on other schedules they thought it might have been tough. Somebody said 05. I don't think that 05 schedule was really all that challenging, to be honest with you. I mean, you had a couple great teams at the top, but there was also a lot of really mediocre teams on that schedule. So, Pitt, like if you look at the rankings before they played, it would have looked a lot tougher. They played at Pitt, who was ranked in the top 25 at the time. You had to play at number 3 Michigan. You had to play Michigan State at home. You had to play at Washington. You had to play at Purdue, who was ranked 22nd at the time. Then, of course, you hosted number 1 USC. They played BYU at home, Tennessee at home, Navy at home, Syracuse at home, and then at Stanford. But a lot of those teams ended up not being that good, Vince. Pitt that year, who was ranked when they played, finished the year 5-6. Michigan, who was ranked number 3 at the time, finished the year 7-5. Michigan State finished 5-6. Washington was 2-9 that year. Purdue finished 5-6. USC obviously was the national runners-up. BYU was a 500 team. Tennessee finished 5-6. Navy was 8-4. Syracuse didn't win. Went 1-10, and then Stanford had a losing record. So, like at the end of the day, you really only played 2 decent teams all year.
And that's it looks real harder in the beginning.
It looks real hard. Then, if you look at the Notre Dame schedule on like Wikipedia, for example, it'll show that they played number 23 Pitt, number 3 Michigan, number 22 Purdue, number 1 USC, and then also had to play, Tennessee. But like none of those teams finished the year ranked. Like I think the only team that I believe finished the year ranked that year is USC. Is the only team that finished that year ranked, and most of the teams they played finished with a losing record. So I don't like Purdue finished. They were ranked number 22 when Notre Dame went on the road and beat them in a night game. That's why it was on prime time. If you remember, Vince, I think it was the ABC game that night.
Yep.
Because Purdue was ranked at the time. Well, Purdue ended up not being any good. So like Notre Dame kind of exposed that. They were 2-1. They started the year 13th, won 2 games, lost at Minnesota, dropped it from 11th to 22nd. Notre Dame smacked them, and that was part of a 6-game losing streak for Purdue. So like they weren't that good. So the 05 schedule actually wasn't that hard. I would argue the 06 schedule was harder because Michigan was really good that year. If you remember that year, Michigan in 06 played in that number 1 versus number 2 shootout against Ohio State. They played a good Penn State team. So I don't think the 05 schedule is all that tough. So, and for people talking about like 88 and 89, the question was from 86 to present, I kind of read that incorrectly. I looked at it kind of since the Lou Holtz era. You know what I mean? He mentioned since the Lou Holtz era, so I kind of was focused on post Lou Holtz.
Yeah, like after
schedule.
he was done. Yeah.
But yeah, the 1989 and 1988 schedules were incredibly hard as well. In 1988, Notre Dame beat, if you look at the end of the season, Vince, this is great. Now, it was very top-heavy schedule, but Notre Dame beat, and this is final rankings, they beat the number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 teams in the country that year. Notre Dame did. They beat, and they also beat number, what did USC finish? Number 7. So they beat number 2 Miami. They beat number 4 Michigan. They beat number 5 West Virginia, and they beat number 7 USC that year. 1989 was even tougher, in my opinion, because they played a lot of really good teams at the top, but they also played a lot of teams that finished ranked. So they started the season that year against Virginia, who was unranked at the time, but Virginia finished that year 18th. That was that Sean Moore, Herman Moore, Chris Slade team. They played Michigan that year, who finished 7th. They played Michigan State. They played at Purdue. They played Stanford. They played at number 17 Air Force. They played USC, who was ranked 9th. They played Pitt, who was ranked 7th. They played Navy, SMU, who had just started their football team again. They played at number 17 Penn State, and then they played at number 7 Miami. And then obviously Miami ended up going on to win the national championship that year. So that season they played, as I mentioned, what I say, Michigan ended up ranked 7th, right? They played number 16 Michigan State. These are final rankings. Number 16 Michigan State. They played Air Force, who went 8-4-1. They played number 8 USC. They played number 17 Pitt. And they played number 15 Penn State, and then number 1 Miami. Like, that was a brutal schedule. So if I'm looking at this correctly, Vince, that 1989 team beat, see here, number 18 Virginia, number 7 Michigan, number 16 Michigan State, number 8 USC, and number 15 Penn State, number 17 West Pitt. So they beat 6 top 20 teams that year. And then their only loss was to the national champs. So if Lou Holtz had those back-to-back years of, and that's why I don't hear people complaining, oh, the schedule's too hard. You know, like, no, those were brutal schedules. They got it done. But since Lou Holtz is how I originally took the question, why I went 97 in 2017.
Just listening to you go over all of those, the schedules in general were harder back then. Just from those are all Power 5 schools. You know what I mean? And they didn't. And I realize things have changed, and I get everything, right? But as you're rolling through the names of all of those teams, it's like, okay, well, there's no MAC schools on there. Sometimes they had double service academies, that kind of a thing.
And some like Navy back then was worse than a MAC team. I mean, Navy back then was terrible.
That's a good point.
Like in 1989, they played SMU, who literally was in their first year back after having been banned from having football for 2 years, right? So, I mean, like they played Rice one year. So, no, there's no MAC team. Like the year they won the title, they played Rice. So, yes, those schedules were definitely harder at the top, Vince. But what I've always kind of contended is those schedules also had a lot of softness at the bottom. And that was a little bit of
fair enough.
But the 89 team was like Purdue wasn't great back then. Michigan State was up and down back then. So it depends on who you're talking to, So like Fred Akers was the head coach at Purdue from 87 to 90. They went 3-7-1, 4-7, 3-8, 2-9. Yeah, you're playing a Power 5 team, but they're not good. And back then it had been like what the Power 8, Power 7, something like that, because you had the Southwest Conference still and the Big 8. But then George Perlis at Michigan State was very up and down. There was teams he had that were good, teams that he had that weren't. So he was the head coach the same time as Lou Holtz. His career ended in 94, but in the time when he faced against Holtz, they went 6-5, 9-2-1, 6-5-1, 8-4, 8-3-1, then 3-8, then 5-6, then 6-6, then 5-6. So there was a lot of up and down. USC had some good teams some years, but other years they weren't quite as good. So I'm not saying the schedules weren't hard. I just think we mythologize it a little bit. I don't think that's the right way to say it, but there was also some garbage on that schedule too. Now those schedules are still way harder than some of the schedules Brian Kelly had at the end of his career.
Right.
If we're being honest, but even then, some of that was just bad luck. Like the 2021 schedule, they did not intend for that to be a crap schedule. Like you had Florida State to start the season off on the road. You usually expect that to be a tough game. Toledo's a really good MAC team. You got Purdue. You play Wisconsin on a neutral field. Wisconsin's usually pretty good. You're playing Cincinnati at home. You play at Virginia Tech. You got USC. You got North Carolina. You play at Virginia. You play Georgia Tech. Well, Stanford. A lot of those teams were down. You know, I mean, if you'd have got Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech a few years before, that's a much tougher game. You know, North Carolina from some years is real dangerous. So sometimes having a tough schedule or not a tough schedule is bad luck. You know, just like, look, we tried to schedule tough, but it's not our fault that those teams all kind of went in the tank from the time we scheduled them, you know? So that's kind of part of the conversation too, Vince, is did you schedule with the intent of it being challenging?
Right.
Back in the 80s and 90s, they scheduled with the intent of it being a challenge. Some years Pitt wasn't as good as they were other years, but you're still playing Pitt. You're not playing Bowling Green, right? But they're still worse, and this is the thing, there needed to be that. Notre Dame, you can't go undefeated when you're playing that every single week.
Right. This is the video game where you just load up with like top 10 teams.
Yes.
That's not realistic.
Like Miami back then, it's one thing I always give a lot of credit to Miami too, because back then, Vince, they would schedule tough. And, you know, you look at the 1988 season when they beat Notre Dame, or when Notre Dame beat them, they started the season off against number 1 Florida State. Then they went on the road to play Michigan, who was only ranked 15th because Notre Dame beat them the week before. They ended up being ranked 4th. That Notre Dame game and Miami games were their only losses. They started the season off 0-2 against Notre Dame and Miami, lost by 2 points and 1 point. Because remember, they were beating Miami big in that game, and then they tied Iowa, and they beat Indiana, who's ranked, beat Ohio State on the road, beat USC in the Rose Bowl and all that, right? But Miami played those two teams. They played Wisconsin and Missouri, who weren't very good. Then they played at Notre Dame. They played at LSU that year. They played Arkansas that year, who was a top 10 team. Arkansas finished 12th that year under Ken Hatfield. And then they played BYU, who a couple years later beat them. Yeah, that's tough. But then they also scheduled Cincinnati, who at the time wasn't very good. They scheduled East Carolina. They scheduled Tulsa. So you've got to be able to have those games on your schedule. You have to. You can't manage a schedule that's worse than that's any harder than what you already have. And so that's why I get frustrated. People go, why are you playing MAC teams? So you can make it through a season? You know what I mean? Like
100%. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to get a tougher test out of Miami, Ohio than you would get out of Vanderbilt. You know, so the intent back then was there. That's why I've always I love Steve Spurrier from an offensive mind standpoint, and he was a brilliant coach. But I never respected him as much as I respected Bobby Bowden because he wasn't willing to play tough. You know, where Florida State never – and I was actually watching the U the other night, and I remember this quote. The guy from the U said, hey, we always respected Florida State because they didn't duck us like the Gators did. They play us every year. And Florida State's never gotten out of that schedule. But then, you know, they had to play, you know, Clemson. In 1988, Florida State finished 3rd, Vince. They played Miami on the road in the opener. They played at Clemson, who finished that year number 9. Remember, Clemson had won a national championship like 6 or 7 years before that. They played Michigan State. They played at South Carolina, who was ranked. They played Florida. So, like, there was an intent by those schools to schedule well. And I think the 93 team that won the title, if I remember correctly, I think they played Michigan that year. Or no, they didn't play Michigan that year. They played Florida, Notre Dame, non-conference. There was a year in there that Florida State was really good, where they had to play Michigan. So there was an intent, in my opinion, for teams like that to schedule well, and it was 1991 is when they played Michigan. 90 and 91, I think they had home and home against Michigan, I believe. No, they didn't play them in 91. They played them in 90. They played them in 91. So I just remember Charlie Ward playing against Michigan. So it would have been 91. That year, they played BYU, who was ranked. They played Michigan on the road, who's number 3. They played number 10 Syracuse. They played LSU on the road, Louisville on the road, number 2 Miami, and at number 5 Florida at the end of the year. So I respect people that try to challenge themselves schedule-wise, but it doesn't work out all the time. Like Georgia last year. Did you ever hear me? Like, I acknowledge that Georgia's schedule was soft last year, but did you ever hear me give them a hard time for it? No, for 2 reasons. Number one is they normally schedule tough. They've played Notre Dame in recent years. They played Boise remember when they played Boise when nobody would play Boise outside the Power 5, in the Power 5, because they didn't want to get beat. And they scheduled Boise. They played Virginia Tech, back when Virginia Tech was a really good program. They play Clemson all the time. They already have to play Georgia Tech. Like I said, they have Notre Dame. They've got an Ohio State series, I believe, coming up soon. But 2022-3, it wasn't their fault that their schedule ended up being soft because, A, the SEC East was bad, but the league canceled their Oklahoma game. They were slated to play Oklahoma, and the league canceled it because Oklahoma was now going to be joining the SEC. And so I don't give them, whereas Michigan canceled series with, who was it? Was it UCLA? I think they canceled a game with UCLA so they could have a soft schedule. I don't respect that.
Yeah, it's different.
You know, I mean, yeah, I guess it worked out for them, but it's kind of like, you know, but do you really feel good about yourself, you know, like doing that? Sadly, Michigan fans will say yes.
They do. Yeah. I mean,
Michigan fans will say yes.
Especially with under the current situation going on over there. They're cool. They're good.
Yeah, they're a unique bunch, Vince. A very unique bunch. We have a couple super chats, man. Let's get down to some of them.
In the Milton fan, thank you so much for the super chat. Best one-on-one player matchups for Notre Dame players, like a best on best, i.e. Nelson versus X from another team. BK smells like burnt hair and BFD.
I don't even know what that means, but
I don't either.
Appreciate the super chat, man.
Yeah.
Best one-on-one player matchups for Notre Dame players this year. Well, I was very much looking forward to seeing Charles Jagasaw go against a bunch of different defensive ends this year, but now that's not a best matchup. That's more of a concerning matchup. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm really looking forward to seeing Billy Schrouth go against Josh Farmer at Florida State. That kid's a good football player. Very good football player, and he's going to be matched up against Billy quite a bit that game because he's more of a three technique. That's going to be a good one. I mean, Louisville, Quincy Riley against Chris Mitchell and Bo Collins is going to be one that I'm looking forward to watching. Looking at receivers, you know, in Notre Dame's DBs, there's not a Marvin Harrison, Benjamin Morrison matchup this year like there was last year, but there's a couple good ones. I'm curious to see how Louisville's going to use Colin Lacey. Are they going to play him at Z, where he's going to be matched up against Christian Gray, Jane Mickey? Do they going to play him in the boundary times? They move them all over. So I can't really say, you know, who that matchup is going to be against, but I'm curious to see how they're going to match up. But they got a kid named Ja'Cory Brooks, who I think is going to play in the boundary more often, transfer from Alabama against Benjamin Morrison. That's one that I'm looking forward to. Should be a pretty good matchup. But honestly, there's a bunch of safety matchups against Mitchell Evans I'm looking forward to, Vince. Because when we did our all-opponent team, one thing we talked about was, man, there's a lot of really good safeties on the schedule for Notre Dame. Jonas Saker at Virginia. You got Dylan Thieneman, you know, at Purdue, who are two preseason All-American kids. How are they going to, you know, use those two All-Americans against Mitchell Evans? I'm very much looking forward to seeing kind of what those matchups are like. Those are going to be very interesting matchups. And like Notre Dame's D-line against Florida State's veteran linemen, they're not great talents. Otherwise, they wouldn't be 60-year seniors in the NFL or in college football, right? Like, let's be honest. If they were first-round draft picks, they would be gone, just like if Howard Cross was going to be a first-round draft pick, he'd be gone as well. But they're very good college football players. I mean, I think Maurice Smith and Darius Washington were both first-team all ACC players. And I believe, I'd have to go look again, but I believe one of the two of the magazines had like Darius Washington as like a second or like a third-team All-American type of player. So to see him go against like R.J. Oben and guys like that, R.J. Oben had a very good game against Florida State last year. And then, of course, inside Riley Mills and Howard Cross, especially Howard Cross going against the center Maurice Smith is going to be a really real good on good matchup for sure that I'm looking forward to seeing. And look, there's a little payback, in my opinion, for the Notre Dame interior guys against Louisville. They did not play well against Louisville last year, and they got a really good guard named Michael Gonzalez, who's a very good football player. Was on my preseason all-opponent team, and I'm very curious to see how, like, you know, can they up their game against him this year? That's a little payback time for them as well. So those are some of the matchups just kind of off the top of my head that I'm looking forward to seeing this year. Some of my favorite things that I'd have to ask about, Vince, is more going to be like coaching matchups, you know, like Freeman against Elko and you know, Colin Klein against Al Golden in the opener. I really like Colin Klein is a good one. You know, Lincoln Riley against Al Golden, you know, part 3, you know, round 3, you know, Lincoln got the advantage in 2022. Coach Golden got the advantage last year. I would say that Coach Golden's win was a lot more impressive than Coach Riley's win, but now it's round 3, right? So I'd rather be 2-1 with less impressive wins than 1-2 with my one win being really, really good, right? So that's going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to, Marcus Freeman, Mike Norvell, two of the young, cool coaches in college football, guys that are building their programs, kind of that battle. And then just, whenever I'm asked about who has the best coordinator tandems college football, Notre Dame's always in the conversation. I think Florida State's always in the conversation with Alex Atkins and Adam Fuller. So, that battle against the Notre Dame coordinators, like I'm kind of, me, Vince, I kind of nerd out a little bit when it comes to that kind of stuff. But those are the ones that are that I like, even though you didn't ask that because you asked for players. But that's what I think of when I think of the interesting battles, because with a lot of these teams and with Notre Dame, there's a lot of, well, I don't know what this team is going to be here, or how they're going to use this guy that's from the portal or whatever the case may be. So it takes away from some of that. You just don't see as many of the long time, dude, senior versus senior like we used to see back in the day, because that kid, well, they had him last year, but now he's playing at Bama, or now he's playing at Georgia, or whatever the case may be. So it takes a little bit of it.
Another super chat from Aiden Benami. Thank you so much for the super chat. Most important thing, Marcus Freeman's own coaching can improve on.
Own coaching? So for like him, it just
I think that's
being a little bit more. There's some in-game decisions that I think, looking back, he'd probably be like, if I could do it over again, I would probably done a little bit different. Like would he have gone for it on 4th and 10 plus against Louisville down 24-10, or was it something like that, right? Maybe not. Being more alert at the end of the Ohio State game to make sure you had 12 guys on the field, or 11 guys on the field. I'd rather have 12 than 11. 11 guys on the field. That would, for 2 plays in a row, some stuff like that. We're just being more in the moment, being present of like, okay, what's the operation for this? Just a couple things like that. I would probably say, he could improve on. And then the other thing is just evolving as a head coach in regard to how do you prepare your team from week to week? That's the big thing, is just, this is a team that's been a little, like what we talked about yesterday, Vince. Like, one thing about Brian Kelly is his team was always here. It was always here. Now, the problem is, here meant you beat a lot of the teams that you were supposed to beat. Not always as impressive as you should, but it also guaranteed you're going to lose to the best teams in the schedule.
Right, exactly.
Where Notre Dame's had a lot more up here, but they've also had a lot more down here than Brian Kelly did in his tenure. So you've got to eliminate this and stay more up here. So yes, you like the steadiness that you bring to the table, but you want your level of steadiness to be much better than Brian Kelly's level of steadiness, because you want to be able to win some of those big games. That's going to be the key for me.
And that's a balancing act, right? And we've seen improvement from year 1 to 2 on that, and then just need to continue to see that improvement from him from year 2 to 3 and beyond. John A1, in terms of pure ability and talent, has Mike Denbrock had a more diverse group to include potential of past units than what he has with Notre Dame in 2024?
I like the use of the word diverse, because if you're just going to say, has he had more talented rosters, I'd say, yeah, he had one last year. I mean, the 3 guys he had at the top of his lineup last year were elite, with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. But when you use the word diverse, well, all their talent was really in 3 spots. It was receiver, quarterback, and left tackle. Like, that was where their dominance really was. And they maybe, they didn't have the running backs and things like that, where, like, does Notre Dame have a position group as good as LSU's receivers were last year? No. But the gap between their receivers last year and Notre Dame's receivers this year, I would argue, is surpassed by how much of an advantage Notre Dame has at running back and tight end and, defense, that he's got to work with. I mean, that matters. What you have defensively matters. What you do impacts what you do as an offensive coordinator. Like, if you have a defense you can trust, I may not take this chance here on 3rd and 9 in my own 22. Or we're gonna try to convert the first down, but I'm not being as aggressive, because we can punt the ball away. Our defense is going to do their job, and we're going to live to fight another day. Where whenever you punted the ball against, last year, you kind of just assumed that the other team was going to get a score, and you had to play call accordingly. So, is it more diverse? Yeah, I would say it's more diverse. I don't know that it's the best group of talent that he's ever had, but it's certainly more diverse. The closest you actually might come would probably be 2021 Cincinnati, because they not only had that really good receiving core, they had a quarterback that was drafted in the second round, but Jerome Ford, the transfer from Alabama at running back, was a really good player too, and they were pretty loaded at tight end. So that group had a very unique skill set, and the type of players they had were different. The Jerome Ford was a burner. Their number 2 running back was kind of a bigger guy. Alec Pierce was a tall, athletic guy. Their other receivers were a little shorter. They were different types. Their 2 tight ends were very different from each other. So I'd say 2021 would be the team that I would say would be in conversation for most diverse. Now, not best, because that's last year at LSU, but most diverse. And I would argue that if we're just talking about the starting lineup, that this team has a lot to prove to show me that they're better than the 2015 Notre Dame team, talent-wise. Because that team had CJ Prosise. Because, again, we're looking back in hindsight 2020 of what we know compared to what we don't know about the current unit. You've got, in 2015, you had Will Fuller, you had CJ Prosise, Chris Brown, Amir Carlisle, Deshaun Kaiser, and your offensive line had 3 first-round draft picks, a second-round draft pick on it. I don't know that this offensive line has any first-round draft picks on it. We don't know that yet, so hindsight-wise, he might have even had a better group at Notre Dame starter-wise. The difference with this team, Vince, is that team was very thin past the starters. Where this team has got a lot more depth, and I think a better quarterback. And it's pretty important. Pretty important.
Very. Oh, another super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you very much, Tyler. Really appreciate it. Guys, I'll be 32 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Tyler. So he's got a birthday question. Would say Lincoln Riley was not a coward. He went to LSU and Brian Kelly took the USC job. How would those teams look different?
I think USC would have been looked a lot like. I think it would have been it would have looked exactly the same as it looked. Just flip it.
Just different jerseys.
Just flip it. I mean, look, Lincoln Riley would have been like Brian Kelly had a terrible defense at LSU. Still managed to win 10 games. Lincoln Riley has a terrible defense, and they go 7-6 or an 8-5 in a pretty, good at the top league, but not like an elite league like playing in the SEC. It would have looked very similar because Brian Kelly would have been able to say, okay, this is where we're weak. We've got to figure out ways to coach around that. And Lincoln Riley just never did. And Brian Kelly understood how important it was to build an offensive line from what you had. Now, he inherited some better players. But, Lincoln Riley, instead of developing kids that he wanted, instead of going the high school route and developing guys, he went the portal route to try to build his offensive line. Didn't work. Brian Kelly let's work with what we have and build up what we have and keep recruiting high school kids. And that worked out a whole lot better than what it did. So I think it would have looked exactly like it would have looked. Lincoln Riley would have had one good season at LSU and one not very good season. Like, I don't think LSU would have been as good. Like, I think this year LSU would have been really good with Lincoln Riley. They would have looked a lot like they did last year, which is exactly how LSU looked this year. A 10-11 win team that lost to the best teams in the schedule because they couldn't stop anybody. But they outscored a lot of other teams. That's exactly how they would have looked, in my opinion, the year before or this year. But their 2022 team at at LSU would have struggled. I don't think he could have got that team going as quickly as Brian Kelly did, to be honest with you. Because I think Lincoln Riley's a much better offensive mind than Brian Kelly. I don't think he's a better head coach than Brian Kelly.
I think that's fair.
And, that's important because, again, Brian Kelly has brought a level of consistency. And I'll say this about Brian Kelly. I don't care much for Brian Kelly, but I don't think that Notre Dame getting softer schedules was because Brian Kelly went in there and said, hey, man, we don't want to play anybody good. And as I said before, one of the softest schedules he's ever had was not intended to be a soft schedule. You didn't go into a season where you got to start off against Florida State and play Wisconsin on a neutral field and say, this is a soft schedule, right? Let's schedule soft. Let's play Florida State and Tallahassee. Now, that was given to them by the ACC, right? But, they knew that was on the schedule and still schedule Wisconsin and Cincinnati. So, I don't know that I'd ever say Brian Kelly backed out of a fight. He tried to sometimes, but he wasn't going to just take anything to leave Notre Dame. He tried to get out of Notre Dame, but I don't think it's because he was afraid of a fight. I think it just was more about he just wanted to kind of do what he's doing at LSU, which is I want to go play golf and have my life be a little bit easier. than it is
And the recruiting that I need to do is within X amount of miles. It's not
right.
flying
I don't
all
have to
over
deal
the
with.
country. I mean,
I don't have to deal with kids going to class and all that kind of stuff. I don't really have to deal with that. But so I mean, he backed out of that. But I don't know that Brian Kelly's ever backed out of, hey, I don't want to play good teams. Because like, here's the thing: if Brian Kelly was afraid of competition the way that I think Lincoln Riley is, there's no way in heck he leaves Notre Dame to go to LSU.
He wouldn't have gone to the SEC,
where you have to play Alabama.
Right.
I mean, maybe go to the East, but you have to play Alabama every year. You have to play Texas A&M every year. That's not exactly like someone who's afraid of a fight. I think he was looking for an easier path to success, but like on field, he was not afraid of a fight. And I never felt that about Brian. There's a lot of things I could criticize Brian Kelly for. That's not one of them. And so that's, where Lincoln Riley's looking to basically schedule his way into success. And I don't have respect for people like that. So, yeah, good one, Vince. Appreciate the super chat also.
Coleman Smith, what do you see the roles of the freshman running backs being?
Well, Coleman, man, you're a member of the message board. I wrote an article about this last week. I think their roles right now are to be determined. I think right now Notre Dame is looking for a number 3 back. Who that's going to be, I don't believe has been determined yet. I think there's 2 scenarios that you could see, Vince. Well, really 3. One is the freshmen aren't ready and they put Devin Ford as number 3 back. Right? That's number 1. I don't think this coaching staff has any issues putting young running backs on the field. I mean, we saw that with Dylan McCullough last year. And, I mean, his 2 top backs last year were a freshman and sophomore. His 2 leading rushers in 2022 were true sophomores who were younger than Chris Tyree, and he put them ahead of Chris Tyree. He'll play the best guy. So if Devin Ford's that guy, it's because they don't think those other 2 guys are ready for the roles that they would need, with knowing the assignments, pass blocking, things like that. I could see a scenario where Kedron develops a bit of a ball carrier role, short yardage goal line, the number 3 runner, and Aeneas develops a little bit of a pass game role where he's got to pass block and catch the ball. Now I could see Aeneas or Kedron being that guy too, but like those are the potential roles that I think they both could serve this season. Now, I think Kedron has the best chance at kind of emerging as just a pure number 3. I can do everything that those guys aren't. You don't want them to do. But I think missing the spring is probably going to give him a little bit of a disadvantage there. But I think he's going to have a role of being a really good back at Notre Dame at some point in time. And I think he's going to be hard to keep off the field for an entire season. I really do. I mean, Vince, you were at practice the other day. You've now been at 2 practices, right? And I know you were standing right there with watching the running backs. You don't see a lot of 6 foot, 230-pound kids that move like
exactly.
He moves.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's a lot of talent at the top with 1 and 2, obviously. And I'm curious to see what that differentiation is in carries and snaps and stuff like that with those 2 specifically, because last year it was heavily, weighted toward Audric for obvious reasons, right? He was 1 and then there was a 2. And it's different this year. It's more of a 1A, 1B. So what is that going to look like? Does that eat up some snaps from number 3, whoever that happens to be? So I think a lot of the freshman running back, this question, Coleman, which is a great question, is kind of TBA right now as to how, number 1, how those 2 guys play, what their plan is for the older 2 guys, and then also who wins that 3rd spot and what they're asking of that 3rd spot, right? So it's going to be an interesting scenario in the backfield because there is so much talent there. And in other years, these 2 freshmen will be playing a lot.
A ton.
And that there's just so much talent there that it's just not going to be the case.
They're both very talented kids. They really are. I'm going to pull up this comment from Salty Vince. This is hilarious. He says, Irish Breakdown, Andy Milton was only asking if you would provide a State of the Union for Notre Dame football. You could have just answered yes or no. So I thought about doing that, Salty, but I thought that had been a really jerky way of starting the show. Like, you're just going to be that way. We're just diving right into you being, jerk face Brian today. Okay, it's good to know. I'm glad to know we're getting that version of Brian today. That's wonderful.
It was funny because we had 2 really good questions, but 2 in-depth questions to lead off the mailbag. Right. And at one point I looked at the clock and we'd been through those 2 questions and we were a half hour in. I was like, we'll be here all day. This is going to be great.
Yes.
They're asking some deep questions today.
Hey, Vince, I know you got a thing at 5 o'clock, but you're not going to be able to.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt. Speaking of Indy Milton fan, here we go.
All right, Andy Milton fan. How excited are you to see Mike Denbrock's offense again at Notre Dame?
Very.
It's off the charts, man. Like
Very.
it's off the charts. Are you kidding
me? I'm breaking down. There's a film breakdown on the message board today, and what I did was I've talked about this on the show, but I take like the 9 Power 5 games they played last year because I don't care what his offense did against Army and Georgia State and Grambling. I took the 9 Power 5 teams, so the 8 SEC games plus Florida State, and I broke them down every play bench. You've seen the chart. It's like down, distance, hash, yard line, back alignment. Is he offset? Is he off back? Is he in a pistol? Motion, formation, play direction, play type, drop type, target, result, and then other little notes on each play, right? So one of the things I wanted to do, normally the target in the past, I would, when I'm breaking down Notre Dame, I'll do the target is the player. Well, with the LSU breakdown, I decided to do it because I knew this is where I wanted to see because I know Mike Denbrock's offense. I didn't put the target as in the player. I put the target as in the position, X, Z, or F. So I went back and broke it all down. And I looked at all the pass plays in those 9 games, and I would take out like garbage if they were up like 42-0 and they were just running the ball. I'd take that series out, right? And looked at how they broke things down, and then put the chart there of the targets, and it's very similar numbers. But one of the things I decided to do, I was just going to do the numbers. So I was like, let me get some clips in there of like top routes that each guy will run. So I took like the top route for each guy to run and found a play and put it in there. And it's part of the breakdown. And as I'm watching this one particular play, they start off in a 2x2 and they motion the back outside to the two receiver, like to the Z and the slot side, motion him all the way outside. And then they run the Z is now the number 2 guy in a 3x2 formation. And he runs a go route from that. And you're just like, that little bit of hesitation by that motion allowed him to kind of get by a guy and go for a big, long touchdown. And you're just like, that's the kind of stuff that you were missing a lot recently. It's just sort of that, we're going to do everything we can to get matchups we like and get people where we need to be. And you're just like, it's going to be fun to watch, man. It's going to be really fun to watch.
So excited. So excited.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a great breakdown and I X's and O's and everything. That was awesome. It was fantastic. And I'm excited about all that. But like, I'm just excited to see an offense that takes advantage of the personnel that Notre Dame has, right? And it's not just going to be, hey, we're going to take these guys and fit them into the scheme. It's going to be, hey, these are the guys we have. What kind of scheme can we run? Like, that's how I feel Mike Denbrock's going to be. And it's going to be that much more effective and efficient, in the big games, which is what matters. So that's what I'm excited about.
Is the band next door?
The freaking xylophones are right out the window here. It's like, really, guys? The xylophones? Can't you find another spot?
Okay. Why don't you go yell at them? Like, hey, go do that somewhere else. We're trying to do a show right now. Yeah, it's very annoying. All right. We got another one from Indy Milton fan. He says, I never saw Lou and have only heard of through you, Brian. Can you talk about him a little bit? Well, I mean, I've talked about him before. I mean, it's kind of hard to do justice to Lou in a question in a mailbag, because I'll just say this. Professionally, Lou was the ultimate pro. He was someone who I met. I mean, I'd been reading Lou my whole life, Vince. I mean, I got Blue and Gold Illustrated as a kid. And so when I first started covering the team, like, that was one, like, oh my gosh, I get to meet Lou Samoji and Tim Priester. I grew up reading these guys, and Tim Priester loves it when I tell him that I used to read him when I was a kid. And I do that on purpose. I do that all the time on purpose, because he's like, yeah, thanks, Brian. Like, you were a veteran at your job and I was a child. But I love Tim's. I like to do that to bust his chops. But Lou and Tim both were very kind to me when I first got on the beat. And they were really the only ones. Everybody else was kind of not friendly. There's a couple guys, I guess, but like of the main people. And Lou especially was just so helpful to me, just kind of helping show me the ropes. And so I got to know him a little bit that way. And then when I worked for him, like, I knew he was a great guy and all that. But when you work with him, you just realize how caring he is. Like, there's still, at least when I left, there was at BGI, there was still a landline phone with a cord, Vince, like old school, like you got to do and it was the same number that fans had since the 80s and 90s when he first started doing the show, because a lot of the older fans would want to call and talk about the magazine or ask questions, and Lou would always answer that phone and talk to them. He had a million other things to do, but he would always do that because he had a genuine passion for, like, his thing was like, I wrote my article, I did my job, you do yours, read it and shut up. He really looked at it as like he wanted to make people's experience in fandom as good as he possibly could. And sometimes he would have to, deal with some cranky old guy that was mad about, something that was completely outside of Lou's control. And he was always so kind and gracious in those situations. And he was always that way with me. Vince, you remember when Brady died and Lou sent us this really heartfelt card, and I was talking to him about it, and he cried with me, and because he genuinely was sad because he also loves animals and those type of things. But he's just like that kind of guy, and just a great professional in that regard. But he was also brilliant. I mean, Lou was absolutely brilliant. A lot of people don't know this. Like, Lou had kind of a Rudy story. Like Lou's mom and dad both worked at Notre Dame. They weren't like professors. Okay. I think his mom worked in like the cafeteria, and his dad did. I don't know what his dad, I don't say, but it wasn't like he wasn't the dean of the law school. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were workers at Notre Dame. In Lou's first 2 years, he had to go to Holy Cross and then got into Notre Dame. And that's how it kind of went. But he had such a great love for Notre Dame as an institution beyond just the football program. He loved Notre Dame as an institution as much, if not more, than he loved the football program. And then, of course, as a historian, he was unmatched. I've never seen it. Like, he made me feel inferior when it came to my ability to recall information, Vince. And
it was ridiculous. Like, he could tell you the 6th string quarterback in 1978. You know what I mean? Like, what?
She did that once. We had 2 new employees, and I was like, Lou can recall it. And they're like, no, he can't. And I said, watch this. And so we walked in the office and sat there for a couple minutes. And I said, hey, Lou, who was the number 3 quarterback back in 1968? He stops. So, like, we're in the cubicles or like in desks. I'm on one side of the wall, Lou's on the other. He and I always have our back to each other. So he spins his chair around, and he's like, because like he loved when I would ask him questions like this. And I don't even remember who it was, but he tells me who it was, starts talking about, he went to so-and-so high school. I think it was in Pennsylvania. He was a great athlete in high school. He was like a 3-sport star. And I'm like, dude, I can't remember who the backup quarterback was 2 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and he was just so great. And he did all, hey, Lou, I'm doing this article on Torian Folsom. Where does he rank all time amongst, running backs through the first 2 years? Okay. He's behind Autry Denson, Alan Pinkett, and Vegas Ferguson, and Darius Walker, something like that. Right. It's like, okay. And what my favorite though was, Vince, at home games, Notre Dame used to put out this notes package at the end of games. It would have like different, first time since such and such. I don't know if they still do that. I haven't looked at it. I'm sure they still do something.
It's in like the press packet at the beginning of the year, in like the back. Yeah.
Right. But, like there would be at least 4 or 5 times a year, they would put something in there, and he'd walk up to it and he'd be like, hey, actually, and he would do it always so kindly and so graciously and so quietly because he didn't want anyone else to hear. And he'd be like, actually, the last time they did this was back in 1992 against Purdue. They actually rushed for like 400 blah, blah yards and did that. And then the Notre Dame media people was like automatically like, okay. And they'd go correct it. They wouldn't even go look it up. They just like, Lou said it. It must be true. And so that was always good, man. And, but you so incredibly humble and just the sweetest guy you'll ever meet. You really was. And he had finally, he'd gotten married not too long before he passed away, and he had a wonderful wife, and he was part of the Romanian church. Is it Romanian? Hungarian? Hungarian. Funny story. The one time I thought Lou was having a stroke because I didn't hear his phone ring. And all of a sudden, Lou starts talking, and he's saying words. I don't know what he's saying. Like, it's not French. He's saying words, and I'm like, is he having a stroke? Like, or is he speaking in tongues? Like, what's going on right now with Lou over there? He was speaking Hungarian. So I didn't know this, but he actually grew up in his home. Like, his family immigrated from here. I guess there was a war in his native country and all that stuff. And I don't know if it was before he was born or maybe when he was a baby, but his parents still spoke that language at home. And the church he went to was like mostly people from that country, and they spoke that language. And that's where he met his wife, was kind of through that and stuff. So, and she was as sweet as can be. And just, but it was just, I'm like, man, you learn something new about Lou every day, man. Like this cat, I'm sitting there thinking Lou's stroking out over there because he's just saying words that don't make any sense to me. And I look over and he's on his phone, and then he walks out, like, because that's how Lou was. Like, he would answer the phone, but then he immediately would get up and walk out because he didn't want to be on the phone in the office and things like that. Because again, that's the kind of guy that Lou is.
Respectful.
You know,
right.
You're not gonna see Lou on his speakerphone at the grocery store like you see all the freaking time. Like, hey, we don't all want to hear your conversation. You know what I mean? Like, but it is what it is. But it just such a kind guy and very talented, knew how to tell a story as good as anybody out there. As well when it came to writing. And he was also, he knew what he was good at and what he wasn't good at. And I asked him one time, I said, why don't you give more football opinions? He goes, you know what, Brian? He goes, I went to a coaching clinic X number of years ago, and I'm sitting there listening to the coaches, and I'm thinking, I have no clue what they're talking about. How am I going to criticize these people for football decisions when I don't have a clue what they're talking about? And he goes, so he would stick to his criticisms would be based on more bigger picture things, but he would never argue a play call. He would never, because he's just like, I never played football. I don't know that. I realized he realized in that moment, like, I don't know this game well enough to be able to criticize them for things like that. And so he stayed in his lane. And that's why I thought he and I were a great team, because I talk a lot and he doesn't talk enough. You know what I mean? Like,
but his words are measured though, right?
And you did vary. He could say, he only needed 2 sentences to say something that I would take 5 paragraphs to explain. Like, let's just be honest about that, right? But what people don't realize is I used to get a lot of crap for you don't let Lou talk enough. And I'm like, I understand all that. But what you guys don't know is I had to drag out of Lou a lot of times. I'd be over there like, and he would do these pauses and you'd think he's done. I have a bad habit of interrupting people anyway, because I look at these shows as like conversational. And when you're talking ball with somebody, there's a back and forth. You always wait for them calmly from the talk. And I could have definitely done a better job of that. It's my first time ever doing that kind of thing. And, but I thought we were a great team because he knew what he was good at. I knew what I was good at. And, I'd lob him up and set him up for those things. He would then kick it back to me. And I thought we did some great shows, man. And I'm so thankful that during that time of me leaving BGI that you got a chance to work side by side with Lou, because you got a chance to experience that firsthand. And it's something else, man, just because of just the decency with which he goes about just everything he does. And it's genuinely just who he is, and that's why I won't say it was easy for him, because I know there's plenty of times Lou'd get pissed off and you'd see he'd want to go off, but he'd be like, he'd calm down. So Lou would get mad. It's just you had to push him really hard to get mad. And I was joking about this with, who was it, Stiers or Tim Priest? I forget who it was lately, but I said, there's one thing you can always say: if you had a beef with Lou, you were the problem, not Lou. You're the problem. Because if there's an issue between you and Lou, it ain't him, it's you. You're the problem. I can promise you that, because yes. And so that's just kind of who Lou was. So I wish I could, makes me sad you didn't get to experience Lou and what he did. Indy Milton fan, but he was a treasure, man. He truly was a Notre Dame treasure. There's no doubt about it. Just as a person, but then also professionally with the quality of the work he did. We don't have anyone like him on the beat, with all due respect. And anybody. And who else will tell you that? Anyone else on the beat that worked with Lou. Like, just he was one of a kind. He truly was one of a kind. All right. When it comes to linebackers at Notre Dame, the discussion that I've noticed trends towards blitzing abilities. What are your expectations in pass coverage and ability to disguise coverage? When it comes to linebackers, the Notre Dame discussion I've noticed towards blitzing abilities. Well, I will say this, Vince. I'm not sure how you felt about this, but I do think at times last year they telegraphed their blitzes a little bit more than they probably should have.
They were terrible at it in Golden's first year. They got better at it the second year, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. I'll say that.
Yeah. So, like when I look at it, Vince, I think that's an area where I don't know that they're going to get better at that this year because they're young. Like I don't know if year one of Drake Bowen is the year you get better at disguising coverage. I think the thing is just you got to see if they can land, get home. You know, when you're asking them to do that, get home. I don't know if you're going to do two. I mean, you look, there's some disguising you'll do naturally. You know, you line up tight, you drop, you bring blitzes from depth. There's a little bit of disguising naturally, but I don't know that we're going to see the linebackers disguise coverages in the same way that we thought that we did see from like this, like that, or that we will see from the secondary this year, which is going to be a much more experienced group. That would be kind of my thought so far on that group. Muhammad Abdi. This is a very interesting one. It says, Brian, do you prefer losing at Texas A&M and winning out, or winning 11 straight and losing at USC? And how will recency bias affect seeding with the latter scenario like 1989? Well, I mean, in 1989, I kind of felt like, I mean, that was kind of a, let me pull up Notre Dame's 1989 schedule. Ranking. So they were ranked number 1 going into that last game against Miami, and they had won. They were 10-1 at that time, 11-1 at that time. They had won 23 straight games, and they lost to Miami, and Miami beat them convincingly. And so Miami jumps up from number 7 to number 1, I believe, that year. So, or no, Miami jumped up from number 7 to number 2 that year. Colorado jumped up from number 2 to number 1. So I think that was fair. I think it was fair for Miami to jump ahead of them at that time. And I'm not quite sure who was number 3 for that team. I think maybe Florida State might have been number 3 that year. Let me look at they were number 5. They went from 6 to 5. Trying to see who was the number 3 team that year when they lost. Give me a second. I'm going to try to find that real quick. Wasn't Tennessee, was it? Let me see here. Who would that have been? Let me see. It was not. No, so it wasn't Florida State. It was not Tennessee. They were 8th. I don't know who the number 3 team was at that point in time. Colorado jumped from 2 to 1. Was it Michigan? Did Michigan lose a game late that year? Yeah, it was Michigan. Okay, so Michigan was number 3. So Michigan was already number 3. Then they beat Ohio State, who's number 20, so they stayed 3. So I think Notre Dame going from 1 to 4, I was kind of okay with. Now, I think the argument could have been that Notre Dame should have been, could Notre Dame have been number 3 instead of Michigan? Sure. They had an identical record, and Notre Dame beat them in a head-to-head at Michigan. But at the same time, you could also say that it didn't matter because back then it wasn't a playoff seeding. It was it might have been a little bit different, but Colorado should have gone up to number 1. They were undefeated, and Miami should have gone from 7 to 2, in my opinion, because they just beat the number 1 team by 17 points at their place. So I was comfortable with that. Now, to your question, I'd prefer not to lose either of those games, but in that scenario, I would rather lose the opener and run the table. And it's not even so much about seeding; it's about momentum, and it's about beating your rival. So, I think that the way that committees work usually is if you're same exact record, they're going to view your most recent loss as probably going to impact you more than them looking back at the beginning of the year and you lost a game. The other part of the conversation, Muhammad, is you have to look and say, well, what's the record of the teams that they played? Is A&M better than USC or vice versa? I mean, if USC's 11 or 10-1 and A&M's 8-4, either game's a 3-point loss. Well, you want to lose to the better team. But in my personal opinion, I don't ever want to lose to USC. And I would much rather be hot going into the playoff than coming off and trying to bounce back from a loss. That's kind of how I look at it, Vince. And the seeding part will take care of itself. But I do think you would Like, those are things I know. What I don't know, but think and guess, is that I guess and would assume that you'd have a better shot at being the 5 seed if you had won 11 games in the month of November, had beaten USC on the road and Florida State. That would be my guess on that. So, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Coleman Smith, do you still have your same positive opinion about NIL? The way it's being used honestly disgusts me. It's more of a signing bonus than a service exchange.
You're having two different conversations, Coleman.
Yeah.
Again, I have been and always will have a very positive opinion of NIL. What people call NIL nowadays is not NIL.
It's a cover up for what they've been doing all
pay
along.
For play.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, just handing a kid $2 million to sign with you is not name, image, and likeness. It's not benefiting off your name, image, and likeness. It's just not. It's pay for play.
Yeah.
So that's not NIL. Just because somebody calls something doesn't mean it's true. There's a lot of people that say I'm this, but they're not really that. You can call yourself that all you want, but you're not that. You know what I mean? And so words mean something, and name, images, likeness is not what collectives are doing right now. That's not what it's intended to be. And I'm not going to let people abusing the system make me feel less about the fact that there should absolutely be a positive NIL situation in college football. NIL should be a thing. It should have always been a thing. I mean, Vince, you've heard me on these shows advocate before NIL became a thing, saying like with jersey sales, if you're going to sell a kid's jersey, he should get something out of that.
Because it's because of his actions that you're making that money in the first place.
Right. Like to a degree, right? Like, but like people buy number 25 because it's Rocket, but somebody else may buy number 25 because it's, Randy Kinder or Braden Lindsay or whatever, Chris Tyree or whatever.
For sure.
But when it's being sold while I'm here, it's there. So even if it was something along the lines of, hey, we're going to put this money aside, we're going to put it in a money market account. It's going to raise some interest for 3-4 years. And if you graduate, you get this money. Even if it's something like that, I would have been all for that. So I do think there need to be things where, players should be able to do things, and the fact that they just refuse to let them do it. It wasn't about amateurism. It was about control, and it was about greed. That's what it was always about. Why was a quarterback 10 years ago not allowed to do a Dr. Pepper commercial like Caleb Williams did last year? What's the harm in that? Is Dr. Pepper like connected with USC? And if he gets a Dr. Pepper commercial, that some school's going to get an unfair advantage like Nike's doing with Oregon? No, I don't think that's the case. So those type of things should have always been kind of out there once they are enrolled. That's the difference. Once a kid's in college, those things should be there. Well, what if some school tries to convince them to do? That's not an NIL problem. That's to me a problem of enforcing your rules. You're not supposed to be allowed to tamper. They let it happen. They don't do anything about it. Well, that's not an NIL problem. That's an enforcement problem of rules that are in place. It's kind of like people say now, we need to make new gun laws. Why? Because of something that happened. And okay, but that person broke a law? Right. So you can make more laws, but that person's still going to break the law. There already were laws on the book that said if you are this or if you're that, you can't own a gun. Right. Okay. Well, making new laws isn't actually about stopping that next thing from happening, because some of the most gun violence in America happens places where they have very, very strict gun laws. Right. And so, I've heard people say, well, people come across in Indiana and buy guns and go back and commit crimes. Well, then why aren't people in Indiana committing crimes like people in Chicago are? You know what I mean? If it's the guns, right? So it's like, don't make new laws. Enforce the freaking laws that you already have on the books. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like that this person, cheated on their taxes. Okay, then enforce the laws that you have that don't allow them to cheat on their taxes, right? I mean, there's all these things where it's like, we want to start new laws. No, that's not about trying to stop a problem. That's about just trying to create more control, right? Enforce the rules that are there now. You know what I mean? And then make new rules that maybe add more teeth to the penalty, or not make new rules, but make new penalties tied with these things to make it, to work. But again, that's not an NIL problem. That's an enforcement problem. NIL is not about some school saying, hey, if you come play for us, we'll give you $500,000. Leave your school, come. What's that have to do with name, image, likeness? No, that's you're really talented and we want you to play for us. That's not NIL. So I absolutely still have a positive opinion about NIL. I don't like how people carry that out. just like a lot of things in life, I love the fact that we all have the right to drive a car. I don't like how everyone actually carries out driving their cars. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't mean that, you know what? We should have to go back in horse and buggies now because these people don't know how to drive. You know, so I don't have NIL is not the problem. How the rules are being set out and communicated and enforced, that's the problem, Vince. Much, much more so than NIL. NIL is not the problem.
Enforcement has always been the issue with the NCAA, so we can do a whole show on that. That's always been the issue. ND Milton fan, favorite players in your fandom at each position? Wow,
well,
that's
quarterback. It's kind of a tie.
Okay.
Between my childhood fandom and then my adult fandom. My childhood fandom's Tony Rice, easy. Okay. My adult fandom's Brady Quinn. So that's kind of
Quinn for me.
Kind of where I'm at because you were too young when Tony played.
Yeah, I mean,
right? You're with Tony Rice like I am with Tim Brown. I know it was only a year or two before, but
it makes a big difference. I didn't really start watching Notre Dame football until I was double digits, like 10, 11, 12.
Well, when I was 10 was 1988. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Which is when I was 9. I don't really remember the 1987 season. So I don't remember Tim Brown as much.
Right,
I remember some highlights and I remember him winning the Heisman, but I don't remember like watching him play. So that's kind of where the deal there. Running back, Jerome Bettis. Probably my favorite Notre Dame running back. Love Jerome Bettis.
And I will say, just to go back to quarterback, Rick Meyer is right up there for me because he was the first quarterback I remember watching.
He's your Tony Rice.
Yes. So he's way up there for me. I had his jersey when he got drafted to the Seahawks, and like my dad did the flowers for his wedding.
He's in your state too. I mean, he's somewhat of a local kid too. So he's kind of from your backyard, which would make a lot more sense. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So he's up there for me as well. But Brady Quinn kind of took the crown, a little bit later for sure.
Yeah. Brady Quinn was a lot of people's favorite quarterback. There's no doubt about that.
It's easy to like him for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife didn't care one way or the other till I showed her a picture of him once. And then she's like, oh, let's name our dog Brady. Okay, sure. Wide receiver, Rocket. Rocket's my favorite one there. Modern receiver, probably Michael Floyd.
Floyd for me. For some reason, I love Lake Dawson, probably because of his nickname, like Lake Dawson.
And he was on some of those really good Notre Dame teams when you were a kid.
Yep. So for whatever reason, he sticks out in my head.
Yep.
So
he'd have a great name. Problem is he played for the Chiefs, and that's as a Broncos fan, that was always a problem for me.
Fair enough.
Loved him in Notre Dame. Tight end, Tyler Eifert. It's easy one for me. I mean, there's some guys I liked when I was a kid, but Tyler Eifert is my favorite tight end to watch. He was so good at Notre Dame.
I think as a fan, Anthony Fasano is probably my guy. Just because come on, Anthony Fasano, how Italian can you possibly get? Right. So big fan of that. So I'll go there.
Because for people that are wondering, that's not a Notre Dame thing for Vince. That's a Vince's heritage thing for Vince.
100%. Yeah.
Because they're just like, oh, he's not Irish. No. So that's a family heritage thing more than anything. Offensive line, that's a tougher one. I don't really have one. I have several. Ryan Harris is a guy that I like a lot. Aaron Taylor. But even then I can't because Aaron Taylor played left tackle and so did Ryan Harris. Aaron Taylor probably. Jeff Fain, I was always a huge Jeff Fain fan. He was excellent. And then how do you not love watching Quentin Nelson? He was so good. He was
way
so
up there for me. Mike Rosenthal is a guy. He was another local guy as well.
You can see where Vince's biases are. People from my hometown and people that look like me. Italians. Got to stick together.
Like Anthony Fasano.
I'm talking about Italian.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, and Braxton Cave is a local kid. He was fun to watch when he was here. No doubt about that. But Jeff Fain is a big
really good try-hard guy. Yeah, Jeff Fain.
Yes, he was.
Good.
Yeah, Jeff
he was so nasty.
Yes,
he was so good.
Offensive line, and I tried to teach this to the kids that I actually coached because I did coach offensive line there for a little bit, and it's just I want nasty, man. I want nasty. Frankly, I want that from a lot of my positions, but offensive line for sure. Especially my interior guys. I want you to be nasty and just getting after it. And so guys that play like that are guys that I am definitely on board with.
D-line, probably Bryant Young. Linebacker, I was a big Michael Stonebreaker fan as a kid, but I also loved watching Manti play.
Yeah, how could you not love Manti Te'o when it comes to watching linebacker play? I mean, Jalen Smith is definitely on that list for me as far as
another Indiana guy. Shocker.
Yep, I know. Fort Wayne. So
you know what I love about you, Vince? You're consistent.
You're darn right I am.
I love that about you. Yeah. Corner, Todd Light. I mean, and that, that's an easy one for me, Todd Light. And safety, Jeff Burris, probably. Again, I mean, a lot of your fandom for me is when I was a kid. There's very few.
You idolize those kids.
Right. Because you look at a college football player differently when you're a child, because like they're older, something to aspire to. Then, I'm saying there's a 40-year-old man. I'm looking at a 19-year-old, like, I'm a fan of that guy. Like, no, I love watching him play.
Can appreciate the way he plays, yes.
But it's a different type of fandom. So, like, when I compare Rocket to Michael Floyd, it's Michael Floyd I loved to watch play. I don't have the same personal affinity towards Michael Floyd because I was here covering Michael Floyd, and it's just a little bit different. But you love watching play. Where Rocket, when I think of Rocket, I have more of I go back to being a kid again. And that joy you just got, like, that's Rocket, and it's like, it's funny when I meet some of these guys, like, I'm a professional. I don't get into, I don't know that I've asked for autographs since I was probably like 12 years old. Like, I just don't do that. I like to shake hands. And I mean, I meet John Elway a couple of years ago. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so, I didn't ask him for an autograph. You know what I mean? Like, we're grown up, so I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah, autographs are not a thing for me.
But I still kind of get into like, holy crap. I just walked past John Elway. He almost bumped into me and said, hey, sorry about that. I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome. But you go right back to me being an 8-year-old watching them in the Super Bowl. And like, that's my hero at the time, so like, that's where a lot of my favorite players come from, or guys from that era, it's a little bit different. But man, Harrison Smith his last 2 years in Notre Dame was really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And who? Alohi Gilman has a special place in my heart too. Just the way he played the game and the leadership he showed.
That was mine.
He's another one. Yeah, I didn't mean this. I always do that, man. I steal your.
No, it's all good. Alohi Gilman's a big one for me. If I'm going to go local, I'd go Paul Mawala, but I'm not going to do that because he didn't stick at Notre Dame for his entire. But still a great kid and all that stuff. And I'm trying to think about corner. Shane Walton was a guy because I was always very impressed that he came to Notre Dame to play soccer and ended up as like an All-American, I think, on the football team. Like that's amazing to me. You know what I mean? And so I was always a big fan of his because he was just out there using his athletic ability and just playing. You know what I mean? And so I was always a big fan of his. So that's my corner and my safety.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to push back on something. Chief Brody said, I disagree with the premise that Marcus Freeman's heights have been higher than BK's heights thus far. No, BK also took FSU to the wire in 2014. The fact that you have to start off with a game that Notre Dame lost but didn't lose as badly as everyone expected is exactly the Brian Kelly tenure. That, like, it sums it up. Yes, he beat OU in 2012. That was very good. Michigan State in 2013. Okay, that's fine. But I don't know that I would say either one of those are as impressive as the Clemson win last year, in my opinion, in what they did against Clemson. Especially, Brian Kelly beat a number 1 ranked Clemson team, but that was a team that was missing 4 or 5 of their best players. But when I look at the Freeman tenure, it's okay. Yeah, they almost took FSU to wire. Notre Dame's done that several times. I don't count a guy's high. A high is not they almost beat Ohio State. I don't care about that. It's who did you beat. And it's not just about who you beat, but how'd you beat them. And so it's how you look when you beat them. And I think when Marcus Freeman's teams have been at their best, they've just looked better than Brian Kelly's teams did at their best. But again, I'm talking about just an overall stretch of play. They were always just kind of this. And sometimes it would result in an impressive win, but it rarely did. And the other thing too is you've got to go all the way back to 2012. To 2013 and to talk about a win that mattered under Brian Kelly. It's not a coincidence because that's the last time he really won a game that mattered that didn't have a huge giant COVID asterisk by it. And that's the difference.
It's funny because that statement, this is such a Brian Kelly statement though too. Like he would say these things almost exactly. We were right there. we're competing. We're right there. We just got to coach a little better. We got to play a little better.
Yeah.
That is such a Brian Kelly thing to say too. It's nothing against you, Chief. I understand where you're coming from, but like that is such a Brian Kelly thing.
Yeah. Agree. We finished the fandom thing, right?
I think so. We didn't do kickers and punters, but I'll let it slide.
Well, we can do those. I mean, Hunter Smith was my favorite punter because he was an athlete. Man.
Hunter the punter Smith.
He was an athlete, though. I remember watching his high school highlight film, and this is back in the VHS days, like when Blue and Gold Illustrated back then, when they actually were good. They would have. I did not mean it like that. But they would have like
different back in the day.
Yeah, they would do like a recruiting show. He would do it with, what was his name? What's that guy's name? He's at all the games. White-haired guy, Bob. Is it Bob Nagel?
Kamel.
Bob? No, not Bob Kamel. Bob Nagel. No.
Oh, Nagel, the big guy.
Yeah.
Bob.
But
Nagel.
They would. I think it was him. They would do a recruiting video together where they'd break down film. Like I remember watching Jason Sapp's film. I remember and got a chance to meet Jason when he was on the beat for a while. And I remember that class, but they would have that. And I remember watching Hunter Smith's film. I'm like, this guy's really good. This guy's an athlete. Like I think he was playing like receivers, quarterback or something like that. But he was probably my favorite guy there. My favorite kicker was Justin Yoon because he just was money.
He's just so money.
He was really
he's the leading scorer in Notre Dame history. So, I mean, you got to give him something for that. You know what I mean? And
for a reason.
He was always my favorite kicker. And then he even got a little higher because of how nice he was to my kid when he was coaching him up this past
Justin
summer.
Was?
Yeah.
Not shocked.
Yeah. So
I had a chance to meet his dad around he was flying to the Under Armour thing that's on the same flight I was.
Gotcha.
You meet his dad, and I think his younger brother's with him. You're like, oh, okay, this makes total sense why Justin's the way that he is.
100%.
And you're just like, that makes sense.
Yeah. So he's by far my favorite kicker, and it's not all that close. I was always actually impressed with DJ Fitzpatrick because he did both kicking and punting. And now I realize that means that there wasn't anybody that was any better that was on the roster. So you had to do all of it. But, to do that at the D1 level is actually pretty impressive. So there's always a nod of respect to him. And then, of course, since I am consistent, he went to my high school. So
Yep. Let's see here. Where are we? Oh, here's one from John A1.
All right, John. I've been very low on Jaden Thomas. What am I missing? I see a big guy. He's not a huge catch radius guy that's savvy, but slow. From 1 to 10, how flawed is my evaluation? 10 being extremely flawed.
I'd say a 6. I mean, some of what you said is good. He's a big guy that doesn't have a huge catch radius. I think that's fair. I mean, he's not a guy that's just going to go out there and make crazy Michael Floyd type catches, but he has had some impressive catches when given the opportunity. Part of this is a quarterback evaluation problem. How many times has Jaden been thrown a back shoulder? I mean, the last time I can remember him being thrown a tough ball that he had to go get was against BYU in 2022, and he made a sick catch on that throw. You remember that touchdown pass he caught in that game, or he basically reached around the guy and caught the ball. But he doesn't have super long arms. I would also disagree with the notion that he's slow. This isn't an either-or event. You're either fast or you're slow. There's always degrees in the middle. Jaden Thomas is not fast, but being not fast doesn't mean you're slow. There's in-between stuff. And so I think he's an in-between guy. I think he's also more athletic than he is fast. But he's got very good hands. He knows how to get open. He's savvy. And I also I can't say that I'm very low on so far in his career, him showing that he can answer the bell every week in a way where like last year only missed one game, but for like a good month and a half, he just was basically useless as a player.
Because of the injury.
You know what?
Yeah.
He still went out there and answered the bell, and I respect that. But, my lowness on Jaden Thomas comes from he just hasn't been able to answer the bell week after week after week. But when he has answered the bell and he's healthy, he's a good football player. I mean, he's shown it every time. I mean, think both of the last 2 bowl games early on last season, like he's a good football player. You don't want him to be your number one. And last year he had to be their number one. And that's not Jaden Thomas. But as a number 2, as a number 3, as a number 4, where he can just be savvy and get open. And there's a ton of value having a kid like that on your football team and in your rotation. No question about it. So I'd say 6. I mean, there's some things you're seeing that I don't disagree with. And for me to say 10, I'd have to think he's about to have a 70 catch, 1,000-yard season, and I think you're nuts for feeling the way you. I don't think that at all. I think some of what you see that you don't like, I agree with. I just think people have this sort of it's all or nothing with certain things. Well, he's not this, so he must not be good. I think no, it's a different kind of player, and so that's why I would say Vince. I'd give him a 6. What say you?
Yeah, I was in the 6 or 7 range before you said 6, and so I'm with you there. I think he's a better player than people give him credit for because he hasn't been able to answer the bell. And I do like your evaluation in that he shouldn't be asked to be a number 1, but I think he will be extremely effective as a 2, a 3, or a 4 in that neighborhood. He can be a 2. I'm supremely confident he can be a 2. It's just there needs to be a 1. Somebody needs to step up and be a 1, and I do think that there are those guys on this roster that can be that, and so that he doesn't have to be that. Because last year, when he was asked to be the number 1 and then he got hurt, it was like everything just imploded. You know what I mean? And that was a tough spot to be in because I think you were putting undue pressure on him to be somebody that he's not. And so, therefore, fans weren't happy with him, right? And so I think in this particular offense, in this particular depth chart, he has an opportunity to be that complementary piece that can be very, very effective. Because remember, where has he been most effective, Brian, in an offense? It's been in the slot. And they kind of tried to force him into being that boundary guy. I just don't know that that's who he is. He's kind of a big slot. And I think he can be very effective in there if he's allowed to play that on a fairly consistent basis, because those matchups are ones that you like because he is a bigger body and he is savvy on the inner half of the field. And so I think he can be very effective if he's allowed to really reach his potential with what he's good at. And so that's what I'm excited to see because there are guys that can play that boundary spot. There are guys that can play that field spot now. He doesn't have to be that guy. Now, I'm not saying he needs to start at slot because I think Jaden Greathouse is a better overall receiver, but he can certainly give you some quality reps at that slot, and especially from a game-to-game standpoint where those matchups benefit you as Notre Dame against some of those safeties and linebackers, depending on how they play the slot.
That's very good. Somebody just said something that I'm getting caught up in the chat. Somebody just reminded me, Lou played the organ at his church as well.
Did he really? I did not know.
So I learned this because Lou typed louder than the only flaw. I had 2 flaws with Lou, and he chewed his food incredibly loudly, and he typed loudly. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but I've come to find out I have a disorder that certain noises and like they were explaining what those were, like, typing and this. And I'm like, yep, all that's pretty much me. That can cause very bad reactions. And for me, it causes very violent reactions and very angry. I don't like, how I get at games. So that's why I wear noise canceling headphones. I didn't know that this was a real thing until, people explained it to me and I talked to some people about it. But so with Lou, that was a problem because Lou chewed food real loud and he typed real loud. And so I asked Lou, like, dude, why do you type so loud? I mean, it was a genuine question, right? And 2 reasons why. Number one, he was like, well, I grew up on typewriters. And if anyone that's like old school typewriters, like you've got to hit those things with some ferocity to get them to work. The other one is he played the piano. And so he had like very strong hands and fingers in that regard. So like, his fingers brought force with him. Because of that. And I forgot about that. So yes, he was a man of many, many talents, but somebody just reminded me in the chat that he played the piano at his church, which I thought was pretty cool too. But he was very, very gifted. Like I'm good at like one thing. I'm good at football, right? Like Lou was good at a bunch of things.
That's amazing. So today, because I've heard you tell stories about Lou for years, and obviously I knew Lou and that kind of thing, not to the extent that you did. I've learned 2 new things about Lou today. That he spoke Hungarian and that he played the organ. I didn't know either one of those things. So it is amazing. He's like an onion. You just keep peeling back the layers and you keep getting more amazingness from Lou. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Somebody said it perfectly. Like the world was a better place when Lou Emoji was in it, and that is 1,000% true.
I'm still waiting for them to like name a seat or part of the press box after loose emoji. Like that's all. That's overdue.
You said something the other day, but if I had money, but if I was like that kind of wealthy and I like did something like that's absolutely something I would do.
Yeah.
The loose emoji press box at Notre Dame. Yes. 100%.
We need to start a petition or something like that, because anybody that doesn't sign that is a heathen anyway. So we can get all kinds of signatures.
We can out
that.
a lot of people for not being able to. But like, there's not a lot of guys left at BGI that worked with Lou, but there's a couple that did, and they would certainly be on board with that.
Well, and like you said, you got guys like Priester, and you got that whole clan over
Sam
there, and
him. He had a great respect for Lou. Yeah,
absolutely.
Eric Hansen always had great reverence for Lou. Like anybody on the beat that you talk to that's been around it for a while, they would all speak very highly of Lou. Yeah, it was good. It was good. And yes, the world was definitely a better place when Loose Emoji was in it. There's no doubt about that. Let's get down here to somebody we haven't gotten to yet here.
Alex Flagstad, thanks for the question. How many more coaches does Coach Marcus Freeman have to steal from Luke Fickell before they schedule a pay-per-view cage match? I was wondering where this was going.
That's a great question.
I thought this was going very negative, and then it took a hard turn.
I didn't look at it. I just saw that it was from someone that we hadn't pulled up yet. And that's an awesome question.
I know who I've got in that particular cage match. I'm just saying. Yeah.
It's probably getting close. It's probably getting really close. Well, and then they thought they were going to get one of Chad Bowden's recruiting guys. They were on the verge of hiring to be their director of player personnel, and Notre Dame stepped up and made it happen to where he stayed at Notre Dame. So yeah, they're probably getting close to that line, that list. You know what I mean? So yeah, and recruits, they've taken a couple of those as well. So that's a really good one. It's a really good one. I like that. Alex, thank you. I needed a laugh.
But like Marcus Freeman is from that tree though too. So like they know a lot of the same coaches, and it just kind of worked out that way. But still, that's really funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's go back to the top.
Coleman Smith, what grade would you give Joe Rudolph currently in his 1 year and 2 preseason camps, and why?
B minus. And the reason I say B minus is his O-line coaching has not been good enough yet. It's probably C minus, but his recruiting's been excellent so far. And so it's like, well, I can't really argue with that, So, yeah,
I think that's fair. And I think
B minus is probably where I'd go.
I don't want to say it's the final exam, but it's at least the midterm coming up this season.
Sure.
Where we're gonna.
This is a big year for him.
It's going to be weighted. Yeah. Like this season is weighted. You know what I mean? If we're using grading terms, like this season is a weighted season. I need to see what happens this year because of the injury and the development and the all of these different things, all of these different competitions that are happening, and they've got a lot of young talent, and this season is weighted. If you ask this question again next January or February, maybe we have a different answer, either up or down, depending on how this season goes. This season is huge for him.
Yep, agree. Completely agree.
John A1, which secondary personnel groupings are you most excited to see? 11 personnel is the base, correct? So between 10, 12, 21, 22, which secondary personnel group possibilities excite you the most?
21. And there's one missing from there, too. I would like to see 20 personnel at times.
Sure.
Not often, 20 personnel being 2 backs, 3 receivers, no tight ends. I would like to have that as a change up at some point in times as well. That was my favorite. That's partly my bias. That was my favorite personnel grouping growing up. And when I first got into coaching, I loved 20 personnel, man, because we didn't often have tight ends that were really good players at the Division III level. We had receivers and running backs, smaller, quicker, athletic guys. Yeah. But also that's what Florida State ran a bunch when I was a kid, and I liked their offense. That with Charlie Ward, they would go to 21 personnel, 3 receivers, 2 backs. Then theirs was more of a fullback and a tailback, where I would be more of a 2 backs, like true 2 backs, but 20 is another one. But 21 personnel with this team would be the one I'm most excited about, because you're getting your best proven pass catcher on the field in Mitchell Evans. You're getting, 2 of your talented receivers in the field, and then you're getting your 2 dynamic running backs on the field with Riley Leonard. It's a very athletic group of dudes, man. Very athletic group of dudes that you can do a lot with. So that would be my pick, Vince. What say you?
I think there's also one missing, and it's the empty set. And roll out 5 receivers. Like normally you would put a running back out there, and that's probably what they would do in empty set for Notre Dame. But I wouldn't mind seeing just 5 wideouts. Let's see what happens. That kind of a deal. Just obviously, it's a secondary situation. This is not something that you roll out as like a thing you're going to do forever. But spread everybody out. You've got Riley as he can pick you apart as far as the wide receivers are concerned. But then you've also got a very unloaded box that Riley Leonard can run against too. So I feel like you could do a lot of things out of the empty set. So I think that would be fun to kind of play around with if I was Mike Denbrock. It's not something that you obviously want to keep as your base, but it's something that I would definitely roll out every now and again as an alternative. Muhammad Abdi, Brian, which scenario are you most confident in? First game of the season, defense on the field, 2 minutes left, protecting a 2-point lead, starting at the offensive 20-yard line, or offense on the field down by 6 with 2 minutes left, starting on their own 20-yard line.
I'd probably go defense right now. First game of the year, defense. And that's true in a lot of years, Vince. Usually your defense is ahead of your offense to start the season, usually, unless you're really young there. So defense right now. My hope by the end of the year, it's a little bit of a different deal. But I would always like to play ahead. I would always like to have a lead because a lot of things can go wrong when you don't have a lead, and so I would always prefer to have a lead. You just got to make a stop. So I just got to make a stop, and I'm asking a defense that's been as good as anybody in the country last season of making stops and keeping teams off the board. Yeah, I'd say yeah. So got another one from John A1. Says, now that Charles Jagsaw is lost for the year, which Notre Dame offensive lineman has the highest potential in 2024 as a pass protector at tackle? Upside-wise in 2024, I'd probably say from what we've seen so far, I'd probably say Emil Wagner as of right now. The hope with Tosh Baker is that Tosh just does his job. Tosh is not going to go out there and dominate and don't care. It's just do your job every snap. I don't care if it's just normal, hey, I don't really know what you just didn't really do anything that made me flash or made me notice you or think of you or whatever. I just did your job. I don't want to notice him at all. Emil's the kind of guy that you could have those type of snaps, but then he's going to have a couple that you're like, ooh, did you see that block? And so that's why I would say he would be my pick there for that one. Just Your Ordinary Joe. I hear the BRC Brian rant count for this mailbag at 3.5. I'm going with the over. Where would you say I am now, Vince? Are you able to?
I don't think you've done a rant. You've had some long-winded answers, but that's not a rant. No, hold on.
It's say long answers, long-winded answers. Jeez, man.
You got to listen. Hold on. The first 2 questions of the mailbag were very in-depth questions, like very in-depth that required a lengthy response.
That's so much nicer than long-winded. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean it with love, that.
I think I kind of had a 1 rant. I mean, started talking about gun control and
that's
bad
true.
Drivers, but so I'll say 1 so far.
Okay. You don't usually have 4. Like I would definitely.
Well, we've had some mailbags, but that's normally when I'm kind of pissed off going into the show already. I'm not really pissed off today.
That's good.
I'm in a pretty good mood today.
Hey, it's like you said the other day. It's Friday. We're going into the weekend, man. Everybody, it's mailbag day. Let's have some fun.
I'm a little mad about this one. Drunken Pickle or Pickle.
My mother-in-law hates John Elway.
That would have caused me to not marry my future spouse. Me, not you.
Really?
Me.
That would be a deal breaker.
If my mother-in-law had that strong of an opinion of John Elway, I don't know how far the relationship would have gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what if you found out about it like the week of the wedding?
There's a lot of things I found out about, my wife. So when we first met, first time I went over her house. I'm like, this girl, she must love to cook because she's got all these new pots and pans and and she had bought all of that before we first, when we met. First time I was going to come over her house, she went out and bought a new patio stuff and bought a bunch of new cooking stuff and all that kind of stuff. So
you got dude, brother.
But I told her, I said, you suckered me. And I was like, I'm glad you did. I'm glad she did. But you played me, woman. But it works out perfect because, I do love to cook and she doesn't mind doing dishes. So it works out perfectly. But By the way, Vince, I made a new type of risotto yesterday. So she's allergic to mushrooms, and so I can't make the mushroom risotto that I make. And I don't like using the arborio rice anymore because it's one of the least healthy white rices, and I'm trying to cut back on, on that. And I tried it with barley last week, and it wasn't very good. It's too tough of a grain to do it, but it was okay. So I got is it basmati, right? The basmati. I forget. There's a type of rice, but it's a thinner rice, and so I made it the other day, and I just put some different herbs in it with the broth and stuff, and so I made it with like no mushrooms, and it was really good. So for dinner yesterday, I made steak, and I made a roasted radish, which roasted radish, the way that I cook it with olive oil, a little bit of butter, and garlic, it completely takes the bite out of the radish, and it actually turns really sweet. And it's really good. And then I roasted Brussels sprouts with a little bit of that risotto. It's very yummy. And so then after we're done, we went and kind of cleaned up afterwards and all that stuff. But no, it was kind of funny. Like her mother and I get along very well now. I adore her mother now, but it took a long time to get there. And I'll be honest, like our marriage almost didn't happen because of her mother-in-law. If she would have told me that she hated John Elway, that might have been the final straw that, broke the camel's back, man. I'm not going to lie to you, because I'm like, all right, I'm not dealing with this crap anymore. You live in Denver. And she lived in Denver. If she'd have told me that, right. I got problems with you. But fortunately didn't. But I'm glad that I didn't make an immature decision like that, because I adore my wife, and we're happier now than we've ever been, which is fun, So we were going to just went and got ice cream from the Chief yesterday, and just thinking about like just how much fun we have together now, and compared to where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. So, but I'm very blessed. I'm glad I didn't make that decision. But I would have had a problem going through with my nuptials.
So funny
if that were true. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Speaking of your cooking, my daughter reminded me this morning, no lie, about your promise to make her your homemade fettuccine Alfredo.
Yeah.
So
okay. I didn't say when. I just said I'd make it. I didn't say when.
I know. She's like, oh.
Although some guy tried to tell me that if I don't make the noodles from home, it's not homemade. I'm like, shut up. Yes.
Come on now. You don't need to be getting out the noodle press.
I do have that though. I just haven't used it yet.
I'm not surprised. Bought it for me
for my birthday. I just haven't had time to use it yet, which I'm really bummed.
That's a process though. Like making noodles is a process.
But it'd be so much fun. Like I love making bread. It's just a very calming, relaxing process, and it's a lot healthier. And I'm actually thinking about, like, when we open up our garden, I was actually thinking about like maybe having a section, expanding it, and like actually growing wheat, because I eventually want to kind of, make my own bread that doesn't have all the crap, and because I love bread, but it's hard. American bread, like, it's just so much of it's just crap, and it's really sad, so. But then I can make pasta and stuff out of that. It'd be very nice. I don't know if I'll ever get to that, but like what my schedule looks like every day.
I'm saying I don't know
when I'm gonna have time for that.
Noodles and
but I'd like to get there at some point in time. I'd like to get there in some point in time.
Right.
Definitely on the to-do list eventually. So we'll see. All right, let's get to so tell Chloe I will make her fettuccine Alfredo at some point in time, but I didn't tell her when. I'm a little busy right now. When's her birthday? Let me know when her birthday is, and I'll make it sometime around her birthday.
You're good. April.
Okay, cool.
April.
Cool. So I got some time. All right.
Ira Gordian, not what player has surprised you the most in fall camp so far?
I'd say offensively, probably Bo Collins, just because he's a little bit more explosive than I thought he was going to be. And he's not like he's not like, oh my God, this is the next Chase Claypool or Will Fuller, but like he's a little bit twitchier than I thought he was going to be. I mean, I liked getting Bo Collins, but he's a little twitchier than I thought he was going to be. But honestly, Vince, there haven't been a lot of surprises, which is a good thing, because as high as I am on this team, the only surprises would most likely be negative ones, to be completely honest with you. Rod Hurd moves a little bit better than I thought he was going to move too. Yeah, see, that Vince agrees with that one as well. Those would probably be the two for me that stand out. I mean, like Josh Burnham's had a good fall camp. Okay. It doesn't surprise me. That's kind of what I expected. But it'd have been a surprise if he didn't have a fall camp, or a good fall camp. So that'd probably be where I'd be on that one. But those are a couple. I haven't really been surprised by a lot. I mean, I think teams look good, but we've also had very limited access, so it's hard for me to really Like how surprised am I going to be by a guy how good he looks in drills? He's a scholarship athlete at Notre Dame. Like they should look. That's why it's not a shock that the two biggest surprises are guys I'd never seen in person before.
Exactly.
You know, so now you get to see him in person and like, oh, you know, maybe a little better than you think. So there's a reason for that, in my opinion. I'll say this: I'm a little surprised how much Micah Gilbert's actually challenging for legitimate playing time so far in fall camp. That's been a very pleasant surprise. I thought once Bo Collins gets back and Jaden Thomas is healthy, Mike is going to kind of go back to being a freshman, but he's getting a push. He's getting pushed. He's pushing, I should say, and getting an opportunity to go out there and make an impact in some regard this year.
Yeah, that surprise for me was in the spring, though. You know what I mean? But the fact that he has kept it up, though.
Yeah, but in the spring, there was no Bo Collins and Jaden Thomas's health was hurt.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I just assumed once they came back, you wouldn't see as much of Micah. But we have.
He's pushing for playing time for sure.
Yeah, for sure. He's a good player. Very good player. Pete Weber with the super chat. With the loss of Charles Jagasaw and what you've seen in camp, do you expect an altering of the playbook to compensate? If so, what changes would you expect? No, not really. I mean, yeah, you lose some power at the left tackle spot, but I don't think that really changes what you're trying to do offensively. If anything, you might be able to do a little bit more in protection now because Tosh is a veteran player. He's a more experienced player. You may see some altering to the playbook to say, look, against some of those big power rushers, we're going to need to, looking at it from a coaching standpoint, we're going to need to do more to help chip the left tackle now than we would have with Charles Jagasaw, because I don't know that Tosh can physically handle a Nick Scourton, an Ashton Gillott, a Patrick Payton, the same way that a Marvin Jones Jr. for Florida State as well, the same way that Charles would have been able to physically handle them. So there might be some protection things. That would probably be the only area where I would say we might see some changes. Would be you're going to have to really think through some of your protections in certain matchups against power players, because Tosh is 6'8", doesn't play with great pad level. He's a guy that bigger guys are going to be able to get up into that chest and ride him back if they're at times. Not all the time, but at times. And the more times you ask him to be that one-on-one perimeter blocker, the more chances that something like that happens. Yeah. So Irish Growing Nut, that's called misophonia. And you are correct. Ooh. That is exactly what that disorder that I have is called.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
It's nice to have a name. Yeah.
I thought when somebody told me that I had that, I thought they were joking. They're like, no, seriously. And so you need to look into this. And so I did. And I was like, wow. Because I've never been someone that's like, blame every problem you have on a disorder. But I'm like, dude, ever since I was a kid, I've had very bad reactions to like chewing gum and tapping. And you know how I am about people. Like, you've seen me, like, dude, if that person's phone rings, like people that leave their text message alerts on, if that person's thing rings one more time, I swear to God, I looked at you and Vince, did I look serious? I swear to God, yes. I'm going to go down there and take that phone and bash him over the head with it. You know what I mean? Like, fortunately, I've had the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But like, dude, it's not. And like, even things like, if I'm looking down and Angela's texting on her phone and I see her fingers moving, I just like, oh my God, give me the fucking phone and throw it out the window. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, because I don't want to have to pay for a new one, but it's what I want to do.
It's fair.
I'm like, why do I have, and it's like, well, just block it out. I'm like, you don't think I try? You don't think I want to not be bothered by this? Do you think I want to sit at Notre Dame home games with noise canceling headphones with black noise playing through them the entire time so I'm not bothered by it? But I don't want that. I don't know how to not be that way. And so when I finally heard that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm reading, I'm like, yep, and yep.
Just checking all the boxes.
Yep. So yeah, it's not pleasant. Not pleasant at all. We talked about that one. Oh, here we go. Let's get to this one from John A1.
All right. John A1. If Jaden Harrison is the backup slot, what does that mean for the offense overall? Does it mean speed is now more valued on the outside at Notre Dame?
No, because I think he's a slot.
I'm
kind of confused by the question.
Right.
Does it mean that speed is now more? No. I mean, was always going to be a slot. I don't think the outside has anything to do with that. I think the only thing it would have to do with is you're going to have a guy that you've just got to figure out a way to get the ball to as your number 2 slot. And, crossers, overs, now screens, bubbles. You got to do something because this guy is dynamic with the ball in his hands. Now, he's not the greatest route runner. You've watched him. He's not a very good route runner. I mean, he's okay.
But when he gets the ball,
once he gets the ball, dude, he is lightning.
So you just have to be creative on how to get him the football. Like, that's your job as an offensive coordinator. In the past, I wouldn't have had as much faith that was going to take place. And going back to an earlier question, Brian, that's one of the reasons that I'm super excited about Mike Denbrock, is because he is creative enough to come up with, again, creative ways to get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. This is a perfect example of that. Jaden Harrison is a playmaker, but he's not necessarily going to be able to create space on his own, running routes and doing the prototypical wide receiver stuff to get open. So you got to get creative. Hey, we got to get the ball in his hands. How are we going to do it? I trust Mike Denbrock to do it, right? And I don't know if Jaden Harrison is going to end up being the number 2 slot. I don't know if he's going to be kind of a package guy. I don't know how they're going to end up doing it because, look, let's be honest, Notre Dame has a ton of talent in the slot, which is why they're teaching Jordan Faison how to play the field, and it's why that Thomas can play multiple positions, even though I think he's best in the slot. They got a ton of talent in the slot. There's no doubt about that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it, but I trust Mike Denbrock to make it happen.
Yep, agree. Got a couple super chats down here, Vince. We got one from, we already got the one from Pete Weber. Got another one from Mark 1. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much for the super chat. When Lou passed, I said then you are taking the torch from him.
I appreciate that very much, but I disagree because I can't do what Lou did. I'm not the storyteller that Lou was in writing form, and I'm not the historian that Lou was. The recall that he had was just amazing. But the fact, like I've always said this, Vince, whenever anyone's ever compared me to Lou, it's like the biggest honor you could give me professionally. It really is, because of how I adore him. But I'm not the most humble guy in the world, but that's been kind. But I do feel like, I do feel that but that in regards to things that I think I'm good at, but I do think I'm a realist in that I know what I'm not good at. And people say, well, for a journal, I'm like, stop right there. I'm not a journalist. I never said I was a journalist. I'm not out there trying to I will write about breaking news, but I'm not out there always trying to break news. I'm not trying to tell stories. I'm trying to analyze the game. Right. And that's just not who I am. And so I can always respect Lou for who he was. But, anyone that thinks that you're thinking, Mark, honestly, there aren't many compliments you could pay me that I would be more honored by than that one. You know what I mean? Like, there aren't many. And so that's very appreciated. Very, very much appreciated. And if you knew how much I respect Lou, forget liking him as a person, but just respect the job he did, you'd know how much that comment means to me.
Ray Holcraft, Brian, what do you see as advantages for Notre Dame on both offense and defense as it relates to using the new helmet communication system?
Well, the one thing on offense is I think it allows you, and this is just in general, this isn't specifically to Notre Dame, I think it allows you to move faster because your quarterback you can get things to your quarterback. Like, I think it's easier for a quarterback to signal to his offensive players than it is really for a defensive player to signal to the defensive players. And the reason why is when a quarterback gets a signal, usually everybody's in front of him. When a Mike linebacker gets a signal, he's got dudes in front of him, he's got dudes behind him. Where a quarterback gets a signal and he can go something like this or do something like this and everybody can see him. Mike linebacker's giving signals and the safety's like, hey, man, I can't see you. You're behind me. It's like, it's like we'll be at the grocery store and Angela will be about 10 feet away ahead of me and she'll start talking to me as she's facing forward. I'm like, I can hear you talking, but I don't know what you're saying.
No idea. I mean? Like, happens all the time. Like, can you turn around and just face me so we can have this conversation? Like, I have no idea what you're saying. Come on.
Exactly. But, so so I think that allows you to go a little faster as an offense. You could even kind of do like mini huddles where he gets it, quickly tells people things, and then you kind of go. So I think just in general, it allows you to do that. And then it also allows an offensive coach and a defensive coach. This is a big thing. When you're getting lined up quickly, it allows communication to, hey, watch that hang safety. If he comes down, we're going here before that time gets to that cutoff.
That's huge right there. Right. That's huge. Yeah.
And I think Ryan that told this story? I think it was Ryan that told this story about how, I guess, Sean McVay with one of his quarterbacks would basically just like, they would go no tempo, so he could get lined up quickly and still have plenty of time before it cut off to basically tell the quarterback where to throw the football based on how they were lined up. You're not going to have that in college to the same degree, but it is kind of stuff like that. You know what I mean? Hey, you can tell, hey, there's certain things, Vince, that as a coach, this happens all the time. You're on the sideline, you're yelling things to your players like, hey, 52, watch 52's in the game, or, hey, so-and-so's in the game. Like when they do this, there's this, and you're trying to yell that to your team. Now, hey, you're letting your mic know, like, hey, listen, they brought their number 2 tight end. If they do this, we're checking to this. Here's the call, but if they do motion, don't forget, we're checking here. You're giving that little quick thing. So you made your call to the Mike linebacker. He gets everybody lined up, right? But now it's if you're, you've got a couple seconds left, because you can look at the play clock and know when it's about to cut off and say, hey, listen, if they motion the back weak, we're checking to this. Whereas before, it's like you got to hope that you installed that. Well, now you still have to install it because you can't always give them that kind of check. But just little things like that, I think it allows you to do in general. And then, of course, that also applies to Notre Dame.
And I think that part also could apply more to maybe a younger quarterback too. Yes, there's always going to be little things that you want to relay to your quarterback, no matter if he's a veteran or not. But I think there's less that you're going to need to tell a veteran than maybe a new guy. Does that, you know what I mean? Like, so it'll still be beneficial, but I don't think they'll use it as much as somebody maybe with a first-year starter under center.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good stuff. Very good stuff. Trying to get down here to some people that we haven't had yet. And you know what? I just realized we have not had Tommy Guns yet.
Oh, sorry, Tommy. All right, Tommy Guns, my official receiving leaders. Hashtag The Bo Show leads for receptions. Great House leads for yards. And they both tie for the team high in touchdown receptions. Your thoughts?
I think you're nuts, Tommy. Now, not because of this, just in general. I think, no, I'm just kidding, buddy. Bo Collins leads for receptions. The Greathouse, Jaden Greathouse leads for yards, and they both tie for the team. If I were to say, if that were to be, I could see that happening, but I would actually flip it. And I would encourage you, Tommy, to look at the film breakdown that I did for the board about Mike Denbrock and his offense. And I'll just give you guys a little bit of a teaser. The slot caught more passes than the slot caught slightly fewer passes than the X and the Z last year. Only 4 less than the Z and 2 less than the X. I think Jaden Greathouse, with that being true, say, well, that means it great. No, I think Jaden Greathouse is going to get a larger chunk of the slot snaps than Bo Collins is going to get of the X snaps. So that's why I think that you're going to see Jaden Greathouse get more catches. And then I think Bo Collins could potentially be a bigger yards per catch guy. So if that were to happen where one was going to lead in catches and one was going to lead in yards, I would actually probably predict it to be flipped. And then I could certainly see them tied for the lead in touchdowns. Although I think Chris Mitchell might have a little something to say about that as well. Chris Mitchell might have something to say about all these.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you see him fitting into all of this?
Yeah. So I'm just going with Tommy's players involved. Okay. I think Chris Mitchell, if I had to guess right now who's going to lead the team in reception and receiving yards, if I had to predict right now, I'd probably go with Chris Mitchell.
Me too.
Right now, because I think he's going to be able to do more with less than that, just because of the nature of that position and things along those lines. Somebody in the chat, Vince, this is hilarious because this is when we were talking about food. Somebody said Brian Driscoll only pans account, like a cooking channel.
I like only it though. Pans. I would subscribe.
Only pans. Yes,
that's why I said I would subscribe.
I've thought about doing some like recording certain things and putting them out, but I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Nobody would care about
hey, your smash burger, routine. Like,
that was hilarious watching you take notes. Vince was literally, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? because I'm looking over there and Vince is like just texting feverishly on his phone. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I'm texting my wife how you make these. I'm like, why?
Because I want to try it, man. Like they were so.
She hasn't done it yet, has she?
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah.
I think she's afraid of the grease mess. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So real quick on that, I made some for Ant when we got back, and I made them on like normal buns, and they're still very good, but they weren't as good as they are with the pretzel. The pretzel bun definitely is the
other buns that probably get more soggy, don't they?
Not well, because I put them on, I sear them, so they have more of a crunch on them. Which that's the reason I do that is not just texture, but like when it hardens that top, it takes a little longer for the juice to soak into the bun. If you put that, so like when I'm making it, I put the buns on there, and they just kind of get that little crust on it on the top of it, and that keeps it from just immediately going into the sogginess. But so that helps too, because the pretzel buns could get pretty soggy too if you
leave it.
Yeah, but a little harder to make a soggy pretzel
me hungry.
bun.
You're making me hungry right now. That's what you're doing.
Me too.
So.
Me too. I need to go to Martin's and get some fresh ingredients.
Seriously.
No doubt. Okay, let's get to guinea pig clips.
Do you think that Tosh Baker would start for Texas A&M? That's a good question.
Possibly. Yeah. And their tackle situation isn't great either. It's possible. I don't think he'd start at left tackle because they got Trey Zune. They have a returning starter coming back, but I think he'd be in competition for right tackle. I mean, look, again, I'll say it again. My beef with Tosh Baker isn't, is he a decent college football player? I think he is. I mean, we literally watched him, like, you guys remember the bowl game, right? Like, Tosh played in that game and did not give up a single pressure the whole game, and played against a guy that's is going to be considered one of the, key parts of the edge rush against Florida State this year, because he transferred from Oregon State. It's pretty good, decent football player this year, and didn't do anything against Tosh. He's not a bad football player. I just don't know if he's a really good football player that's going to help you go win a championship. That's my question. He's not a bad football player. He'd start for a lot of teams that Notre Dame's going to play this year. But that's not the standard that Notre Dame is looking for. The standard is, can you go out and win a championship? And is he good enough to be a championship caliber offensive lineman? I have my doubts. I hope he proves me wrong. I do. I really hope he proves me wrong, because I like Tosh, and I thought highly of him coming out of high school. But I just haven't seen it. I can't keep living on what I thought of him in high school now that he's a fifth-year senior. But I hope he proves me wrong. But yeah, he'd have a shot to start for Texas A&M. He'd be in the same boat at Texas A&M, in my opinion, that he is now. He'd be in a battle before Jagasol got hurt. He'd be in a battle for one of the two starting jobs.
Right.
That would be what my opinion. Would he win it? Don't know. Just like we don't know if he would have won a job at Notre Dame. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one. Here's a really important question here, Vince.
Irish Gordian knot, tacos or burritos?
For me, it depends on what mood I'm in. Honestly.
Very fair.
If I'm in the mood for something with a little bit more crunch, I'll go with a taco. If I'm in the mood for something that's a little bit, because like when I have soft tacos, I literally almost turn them into kind of mini burritos. I will take a soft taco, fold the one over, and then fold the other one over, and kind of eat it like that.
Yep, 100%.
So it just depends on what I'm in the mood for. If I'm in the mood for because tacos have a very different, because you're just making different types of meats, right?
You got a crunch in there.
But with tacos, for me, it's beef. When I have a burrito, I want chicken, or I want like
steak or something.
Yeah, or I'm drawing a blank on the type of beef or the type of meat, but it's just a different. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank here, but it's just a different type of thing. And now for me, the toppings are the same, because I just put lettuce and cheese on a burrito. I don't put rice and all that other beans and all that other kind of stuff. You know me, how picky I am as an eater. So I'm
not a beans guy, but I put other stuff besides just that.
Yeah. So, but if I could only have one for the rest of my life, I'd probably go burritos, because I just think it'd give me a little bit more variety. Could have chicken with it.
Yeah, I like that.
Could have beef with it. I could have, a lot of different type of things with it. So probably where I would go.
John A1, will the wide receivers still be good blocking in 24? Will they need to be? Well, the last part is absolutely yes.
Yes.
You've got to be good blocking everywhere. When I coached wide receivers, and I don't know if you were the same way, if you can't block, you can't play. I'm sorry. Yes, there's always a case for if you're just a dynamic wide receiver, we're going to find a place for you. I get that. But overall, if you can't block, you can't play. If you're going to be on the field for me, you've got to be able to block. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah. You make more exceptions for that at this level because there's some guys that are just like, okay, I know that Malik Neighbors can't block, hypothetically, but I'm still playing him. You know what I mean? Like, okay, Will Fuller can't block.
Right.
Don't care.
That. Right.
The RPO has changed this to a degree, but Notre Dame doesn't run RPOs every single time they run the football. And even then, once you see the ball is handed off, get downfield and go get somebody. You don't just, you don't stand around. So, yeah, they got to at least be good at it. And will they be good at it? It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's a different group. It's a different looking group.
Different coach, different group. Yeah.
Bo Collins was a solid blocker, and Jaden Greathouse is a solid blocker, and Jordan Faison was surprisingly a get after it blocker last year. He's going to be a year stronger. I don't know that I've seen much of Chris Mitchell blocking because FIU wasn't good. The only thing FIU was good at last year was throwing it to Chris Mitchell. Nothing else they did they were good at on offense. That was it. They were good at one thing when they threw the ball to Chris Mitchell. I'm dead serious on that, Vince.
That's crazy.
Jane Thomas is a good blocker, yes.
Jane Thomas is a very good blocker.
Will they be yeah. So I mean, I think they'll still be at least solid. Because the thing about blocking too, Vince, it's a want-to thing. More than anything else that you do in sports, blocking for a receiver, there's some technique and leverage involved, but it really just comes down to, do you want to block or not? That's really what it comes down to. It really does.
Aiden Benami, not much talk about Eli Raridan or Jason Onye up to this point. No news is good news.
I mean, we've talked about Jason a couple times in our previews, but I mean, my man, we've had one full practice and they didn't have pads on.
It's so
and
hard.
Every other practice we've been at, they've gone through 5 periods and the defensive linemen are literally just on bags. I mean, or on sleds. Like, I haven't seen Jason Onye take a single rep of anything other than drills since the first day of fall camp. I don't know what you want me to tell you. He still looks like $1 million. Like, I'm not going to make up things. And I'm not, this isn't a pushback. I'm just letting people know, like I say in my press reports, like, hey, look, this isn't everything that happened here today. And I can't talk about everyone, but this is what I saw. I mean, when I have we have 5 periods and they're 5 minutes each. I get 25 minutes I can't watch
to assess the
85 players. Team. If I was to give you a note about 85 players, it'd be 85 little small notes that don't have any substance to them. So, like, you'll notice a lot of times my practice reports will focus on certain positions because I'm like, today I'm going to focus on this group and give you, because the way I look at it is I'd rather give you more of this group than a little bit of everybody. And that's kind of the way that we do it. So I have seen nothing from either one of those players to change my opinion of what they're going to be. We just haven't seen a whole lot from anything at Notre Dame, much less just those guys in particular.
Coach Bent 574 in the last 15.
You did what you said you weren't going to do.
I know, right? In the last 15 years, who was the most impactful player to transfer out of the program? Most impactful to transfer into the program? First guy that comes to mind is Lynch.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Like, if he would have, because if he would have stayed at Notre Dame, that would have meant he matured. And a mature Aaron Lynch would have been scary. I mean, freshman, 18-year-old, not making smart decisions, and Aaron Lynch was really good. He was really good. But, yeah, that would be, I can't disagree with that one. Most impactful transfer in so far the last 15 years, so going back to 2010, essentially, I'd have to say Alohi Gilman so far. I'm trying to think, like, no offensive lineman would meet that. No running backs would meet that. No receivers would meet that. No
this
tight end.
This would be an interesting question in about 6 months.
Correct, because you've got several that could end up being impactful. But Alohi was also here for multiple years. I mean, Alohi was at Notre Dame for 3 years.
He had to sit out for a year.
Right.
And he was a leader on this team, too.
And he's playmaker. I mean, you just think of the pass breakup against Michigan when they were coming back in 2018. You think of the strip he had against Vanderbilt at the goal line in 2018. And he was such a, like, You see the video, right? I forget what game it was, a road game, and he's just going, "I'm not going to let us lose today," and you're just like, okay, that might have just been like him being, you see kids say things in locker rooms, but then you talk to anyone around the program, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty much just who he is, and people respond to it. So, would they have gone 12-0 in 2018 if he wasn't there? Maybe, but he made it sure a lot easier with the kind of leader he was. And I think he was great for Jalen Elliott as too, because remember, Jalen Elliott played a little bit of DB as a senior. Jalen Elliott spent his whole high school career playing quarterback. That's it. They moved him to DB a little bit as a senior because that's what Notre Dame was recruiting him to play. So DB was still very new to Jalen Elliott, and having a guy like Alohi Gimon back there to help him out was huge for Jalen as well. And they meshed really well together.
They ended up being one of the better combos in the country when they were seniors. I mean, it was fun to watch. And then you added Kyle Hamilton as like the third safety, and it was like, yeah, these guys can play.
Yep. Absolutely. Got a super chat that popped up down here from ICURN with Irish Luck.
One of my favorite names on the board. All right, man. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate you very much. You mentioned on the board, Tommy and Parker focus mostly on slots and tight end, and this is not the case with Denbrock, where the tight end and slot is always the first. Well, were the tight end and the slot always the first read? Or was it because that was the best player?
Well, it was both. They were often the first read because they were the best player, right? So if Mike Denbrock had Michael Mayer, for example, you'd see the tight end incorporated into the offense a lot more than it was at LSU. I still don't think it would be as dominant as it was, but it would definitely be a bigger part of his offense. And we've seen that during his times at Cincinnati. Right.
The football. I mean,
right.
And nobody's going to argue the fact that Michael Mayer was one of the best offensive players, if not the best offensive player that they had.
They focused on him too much, partly because they had to at times, but especially in 2022. But it's more so because I think Mike Denbrock understands you've got to spread the ball around. You got to allow teams to focus on a lot more. It's the nature of he's someone who believes in you got to spread teams out for width as well as vertically. It's harder to do that with a tight end unless you've got a Tyler Eifert type. I'm not saying Tyler Eifert was better than Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer was better than Tyler Eifert. I am simply saying this. They were very different, and they put very different impacts on the deep. I mean, Tyler Eifert at times is basically a borderline boundary receiver. Just the way he played and the way they used him. Michael Mayer was a tight end and a detached and attached tight end, a lot more detached than attached, but he was a tight end. There was no debating what position he played. At times you'd watch Notre Dame play like, I think Tyler Eifert was their boundary today. They did a lot of 12 personnel, but they didn't really go 12 personnel. You know what I mean? Like they basically lined him up as your boundary receiver. And I think the big touchdown pass he had against Stanford in 2012, I believe, was him just lining up out wide and running the fade and just outplaying the guy for the ball. So very different type of player. And so I think part of it was that, but I also think those guys were just, as their pass game was very much geared towards the middle of the field, the shorter throws. And that is how I would describe that one. Oh, Vince.
John A1, now that Notre Dame has speed and depth at wide receiver, do you think we'll see more mesh concepts?
I don't think you actually need speed to run good mesh concepts. In fact, I think a well-coached mesh concept is actually something you want to utilize if you don't have speed, because 100%. Of the way that you utilize it, because you're using different things to
get guys open. As opposed
if I have
to
a slow receiver, part of being savvy is like, you see that official? You run right in front of his toes.
Use him. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just got to do what you got to do to get open, brother.
Yep, exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that's why you run mesh, is because you're trying to create confusion in the middle of the field. And it's not in place of speed. That's not what I'm saying. Because if you want to run a crosser and you want to get your guy in full speed and get him the football because he has speed, I get that. But the mesh concept is more about creating confusion to get your guy open as well.
Yeah. Now, does doing mesh when you have speed provide you with more big play opportunities? Absolutely. I would say I don't know that mesh is really what I would want to go with. Speed is I would actually do more levels, because the reason I say that is levels allows me to do things to clear to get my fast guys sort of in space. So I would do something like Sarkisian ran this concept a lot in 2020 with Devontae Smith. He'd actually put Devontae backside, and he would take his two front side receivers and run some sort of vertical concept, double post, double seam, deep smash. I'm talking about, Vince, where you do like the 15-yard comeback and then a deep corner that kind of clears everything out. Different things like that, deep out, or vertical, then a deep out. And then what he would do is he would bring Devontae Smith sort of on an over concept. So he'd let that stuff clear. And by the time Devontae hits full speed, they've cleared that stuff off. And now you're chasing him across the field. Like that to me, whereas a mesh, if you're well coached against the mesh and you see that stuff coming, hey, stand your ground, pass it off, and then you kind of take over the mesh, right? It's a lot harder to defend the levels because it does more. You've got to cover him. You've got to cover him. You've got to cover him, even in zone, because now we've attacked all your zones and you've now got to take someone. Now it's my guy against your guy going across the field. So I think more levels concepts and things along those lines would be more effective than, let's say, a pure mesh concept where you've got a lot more of the guys. Now mesh is also a levels concept because you've got the two lows, and then you usually got like a deep in cut and like a post route behind it. So there's sort of the levels to it. But I mean more of the horizontal levels, because the mesh concept is more of a verticals level. Verticals as a concept is, you're reading it vertically, where horizontal concepts is more you're reading it across. So that's why 4 Berts is actually a horizontal concept, because it talks to the type of read you're making. What I'm referring to, Vince, is more of like the horizontal stuff where I'm reading the clear outs and then you've got something coming on, where true mesh is more of a vertical concept. So there's levels to it, but that's not what I'm referring to in this instance. So like big picture, it is a levels concept, but it's a different type is what I'm referring to. I'd rather see stuff like that with speed. And we saw that last year. I mean, Notre Dame hit a play like that last year. Remember the touchdown pass against Wake Forest? They used Jordan Faison to run a backside post route to clear out that safety, and they brought Jaden Greathouse from across the field on a deep over route. Boom, hit him across. That guy couldn't run with him. Touchdown. And so that kind of stuff is what I would like to see with a team that can. And sometimes that is going to look like a mesh because it's a shallow cross. You do something to get a stack delay, run it off, and now it's my guy versus your guy across the field. And, but mesh is good too. It's a good part of that too, depending on how teams are playing, especially if you're getting a team that plays a lot of man. I'm going to motion and mesh you all day.
Yeah, man is what you want to run mesh against, because mesh doesn't really work very well with zone, because you're basically running from one zone to another, and there's just going to be a defender there waiting for you for the most part. So, but against man, oh my gosh, I love a mesh concept against man, regardless of whether I have speed or not. I love a good mesh concept. John A1, who has the more talented roster, A&M or Louisville?
I'd probably lean towards A&M. And I think A&M has a little bit more young talent than Louisville, and overall just athleticism than Louisville. I think Louisville has a little bit more experience. The other thing too is I think the physical talent at quarterback is a little bit of a difference to me. There are certain spots where Louisville's better. Louisville is better receiving core in my opinion. A&M's going to have a good receiving core, but Louisville's is better. Louisville has a better offensive line than Texas A&M. They have a better secondary than Texas A&M. So it's close, but I think A&M's just got the better athletes at quarterback, running back. They've got more defensive line, linebacker. Just more overall, more athleticism. It's close. If somebody wanted to say Louisville, I wouldn't argue with them. I just personally would go with Texas A&M as far as just because I think their top level is better than Louisville's top level. I would say Louisville might have a little bit more depth because they're older of guys who can play, but I think A&M has more depth of just pure athletes. Would be where I would kind of go with this. So yeah, that was Vince. You kind of same page there. Okay. All right, let's get down to. I want to get to some folks. We haven't gotten a lot of Aiden Benami, so let's get to him again.
I think you might have mentioned this, but true or false, Rubio getting hurt will be a huge boost for us the last 4 to 5 games if he's able to come back healthy. I think so.
It's these are tough questions to answer, Vince, because my answer is yes. It should give them a boost because he comes back second half of the year. He's healthy. He's got fresh legs and all that kind of stuff. But it's only a boost once that happens. It's not a boost in the first 7 or 8 games when you don't have him. It's not a boost then. So overall, I'd rather he not be hurt. But with him being hurt, it will give them a little bit of a boost late, if that makes sense. So yes, I will say that in that regard, it does.
Salty Virginia Peanuts. When a committed player seems to be wavering, and this is apropos, I suppose, what is the role of Chad Bowden and his staff regarding player retention?
And do what you can to try to keep the kid in the class. If you
and
think
it varies, right? I mean,
yeah.
It varies for who the player is on the the route that you're going to take. But you kind of put it into overdrive. But if you're already recruiting them hard, then you continue to recruit them hard,
right? Yeah, I mean it's simple. You try to keep him in the class, assuming it's a guy that you want to keep in the class. That's their role. That's their job. So how that happens is gonna, is gonna determine is gonna be determined by the player. But yeah, that's the job of him and his staff, is to make sure that they do everything they can to retain a player. So yeah, good question, Salty. Let's get a couple more from Salty. We haven't gotten him yet.
Why not? What is your impression of freshman corner Leonard Moore in fall practices?
Long, athletic, talented, great ball skills, and smart football player for his age. Very good player. Like, he could be a dude for Notre Dame at some point in time down the road. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think he is the leading freshman right now for that maybe 4th corner spot, right?
Oh, I mean, he's leading freshman for sure, because Carson Hobbs is playing nickel. So he's the only freshman. But is he in the conversation for that 4th corner spot? Yeah, I think so. Now he's got more work to do to beat out Chance Tucker, but yeah, he's going to have it. He's going to be in that conversation. Yeah, he's going to be in that conversation.
Another one from Salty. You, Brian, bumped into Coach Madison at last Thursday's practice. Can you give some more detail on him?
No, I mean, there's nothing that I didn't put on the board other than just nice, super nice guy. So, Vince, I told you about that. I bumped into him. He was going to Notre Dame's practice, and he was asking somebody there if they knew kind of where the practice was. And I was like, hey, Coach, I'm heading that way. Come with me. Just a super nice guy, real friendly, bubbly. Like, man, I don't have as much energy as you do now. Like, I'm 46 and you're in your, I think, 70s now, and you got way. I'm like, Coach, can you slow down a little bit? I'm having trouble keeping up, man.
And by the way, the dude looks jacked too.
Yeah,
like he's in really good shape for his age. Like I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley. You know what I'm saying? Like,
super kind, super decent, and very high on Marcus Freeman. And then, of course, we reminisce a little bit because he's talking about where their offices were and all that other kind of stuff. And that was cool. He's like, man, when I was here, and he starts pointing at the Joyce, like, our offices were in there. And it's like, they didn't have any of this stuff. And, so just a really nice guy.
They were in the Joyce Center when he was here. Probably,
there was no,
right?
I mean, the Goog wasn't built till Charlie was here.
Yeah.
So, yep. That was good stuff. Good stuff. He was really, really kind, really good dude. I'd never met him before, Vince. So I had no idea what to expect. And you think D-line coach, you think like, gruff and tough guy. And, I'm expecting him to have like a big thing of chewing tobacco in his mouth. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of what you expect from a D-line guy, how you doing today, coach? Just kind of what you growl at me a little bit. Not at all how he was. Just super nice and super decent.
Tyler Long Break, you have to pick a new OC and DC for Notre Dame, but your only options are ACC head coaches. Who do you pick?
let me think about it. Let me go to the ACC. I'm leaning towards it is Mike Norvell. I'm leaning towards who would be my offensive coordinator. I think he was a very sharp offensive mind, but I don't want to definitely say that because I want to look through everybody first. Definitely would have him over Bill O'Brien. Let's see, Justin Wilcox, my leading early contender for defensive coordinator. Nobody, Dabo, no. Dabo might be my receivers coach, but no Manny Diaz, Mike
He was
Norvell.
never a coordinator, right? I mean, didn't he go
Dabo?
straight to being a head coach?
Yeah, but I mean, he could do it, but yeah, I wouldn't have him as my coordinator. I don't like their offense. Norvell's my offensive guy. Brent Key would be my O-line coach. Jeff Brom would be my OC. He'd be my OC. That's a given. He's my offensive coordinator. Defensively, am I still there? Dave Doran may be my D coordinator. I can't stand the guy, Vince. I don't like him personally. He's just bothers me. But Pat Narduzzi was a heck of a defensive coordinator, man.
Well, would you want him on your staff?
No, I wouldn't want to have to deal with him all the time. But
exactly.
Man, it's like, dude, man, it's a tough one. That's a tough one. But I'm probably going to stay with Justin Wilcox as my D coordinator and then have Jeff Brom as my offensive coordinator. Maybe not Mike Norvell if you wanted more of a balanced offense, but those would be my picks. Those would be my picks. We have a very important question up next, Vince.
Brian Barry, very important question. What's the plan for IB tailgates and which games for this fall?
So that's still up in the air to a degree. We are definitely doing our big tailgate for Florida State. That's the one where my mom caters everything and she's going to do all that.
Time because it's a night game. And
right.
All that,
exactly. However, my parents are talking about maybe coming up for a couple more games this season than they have in the past. And we would still do some get-togethers. So like we might, we tailgate, but it would be more about like, we'd go get sandwiches and fried chicken and stuff like that.
A little smaller action.
Yeah. And not have my mom do as much and then just kind of get out there early because, you don't have as much time to do that stuff when the game's at 2:30 or 3:30. So, but they're thinking about probably Louisville or Stanford. It just depends on one of those two. And then they're also contemplating coming up for the Northern Illinois game, kind of the home opener. So whenever they come up, like if I've tried to tell my parents, hey, just come on town for a game. And they're like, yeah, okay, fine. And then they get in like, oh, and by the way, we're tailgating. Like that. They'd love to do that stuff, man. They really do. So it'll either be Stanford or Louisville right now. Most likely will be the second one, but there's a chance a third may be there for the Northern Illinois game. It just depends on what my parents decide to do. Again, they're business owners. They're also in the process of moving. So like they say that now, but I don't want to commit to it for sure because who knows what they're going to be able to, but they'll definitely, one of those 3 weekends, they'll definitely have a second tailgate or it would be the first, but it won't be the big one. So we'll see, but that's where we're at, Brian, for now.
Domer Grizz, happy Friday. How hard is it as a staff to say, quote, we're going to go with the veteran guy, Tosh, for A&M on the road, play the high upside guy, Lambert, for the next 4 get-right games to prep?
It's very easy. Vince just said it. It's easy to say. It's hard to make that decision because if you think the young guy's the better player, you kind of want to play the young guy. I think Notre Dame actually did this once. I think this is exactly what Notre Dame did in 2018. I believe that Notre Dame always intended to eventually go to Ian Book at quarterback in 2018.
Absolutely. 100%.
But they knew that Ian Book could not beat Michigan. They knew they were going to need Brandon Wimbush's running ability to beat Michigan. That's why you saw a completely different offense in that game than what you saw the next 2 games. And then Brandon struggled in those 2 games where they were running an offense not geared for him. And then all of a sudden Ian Book's brought in to be that guy. I think that was always the plan is we need Brandon to beat Michigan. And then eventually Ian's going to take over. So it's not that hard. It's just, I just have always felt like if you think that guy's ready to play for you in week 2, then you need to figure out a way to get him ready for week 1 also. Even if that just means, Vince, he's rotating in, like every 3rd series. See how he does. And if the moment's too big for him, okay, Tosh, you got this the rest of the way. But I would that's what I would do. If I thought he was that ready.
I have a hard time with, well, he'll be ready game 2, but he's not ready game 1. Like I have a hard time with that mentality.
Unless it's an injury timeline. Correct. I agree with you.
You're right. Of course. Yes.
Agree. Did you want to elaborate on that, or just in general have a hard time with that?
No, I mean, there's nothing really like in general. I have a hard time with that. I don't like, and plus, what does that say to the guy that you're starting in game 1 that you're eventually planning on taking out? Like, are you having that discussion with him? Like, if that's your plan as a staff, like I'm all about transparency. I'm not going to play a guy and with the thought that he's going to get 1 game and then I'm going to pull him. You know what I mean? And so how do you even have that conversation? Like, well, look, man, you're good enough for this really good team up front, but then we're going to get the younger guy in there now with these games that aren't as big of a deal. You know, I just, that's not the right message that I want to send to my players, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Now, you can maybe have that thought in the back of your mind, like maybe, you know, this guy is good enough and we have the most trust in him right now. And then we'll see kind of how things go. Okay, fine. But I just don't like that being the actual plan going into week 1. Yeah, like I said, it's not the right message to send, in my opinion. That's not how I would do it as a head coach. I don't think you're instilling the proper confidence in your players at that. Because then what are other guys going to start thinking? Like, oh, is this a 1-game deal for me too? Like, you know, just because you brought in this 4.5, 5-star guy behind me, you know, am I just a placeholder? Like, I want my guys playing with confidence. That's my biggest thing. I want my guys playing with confidence. And if you're not instilling confidence in your guy that you're my guy, then they're not going to play with confidence. So I just don't like that as a plan as a whole. Isaiah Lehman, which non-starter on the 24 roster do you think has the biggest impact on the 25 season? Ooh, that's a good question.
CJ Carr.
Okay, that's fair. That's a really good one, actually.
I mean, I don't know what non-starter could potentially have a bigger impact than the guy that's probably going to be your starting quarterback next year, like Kirby Lambert. Like seriously, who could have a bigger impact than your quarterback?
No one.
So yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Isaiah, but it's for me, it's CJ Carr. Like that's an easy one for me, unless the only exception would be Kenny Minchie beats him out. I mean, like that would be the only other option would be
quarterback. Like,
yeah, you know. Well, if it's one of those two, yes. If it's not one of those two, then you know a little different deal. But if it's one of those two,
discussion too. So
yeah, if it's Kenny or CJ, my prediction is Kenny or CJ wins that job. But I'm still not writing Kenny off at all because Kenny's we've seen him at practices. He looks a lot more assertive. So we'll see if he can continue building and growing. But you know, it's whoever of those two guys wins that job. That's who it'll be for me. Absolutely, who it would be for me.
Tyler Albany, knowing that A&M will likely stack the box against Notre Dame, do you think Denbrock will dial up a deep shot down the field for the first offensive play?
I don't know about that. First of all, I don't know that A&M is going to do that on the first drive because I don't know that you want to necessarily commit yourself to how you're going to defend a team when you don't really know how they're going to use that personnel for the exact reason that you are asking the question. Like, I don't know that you need to put 8-9 guys in the box in the first play. Because, I mean, think about how LSU started the season last year. Florida State kind of put a lot of guys close to the box, and they ran a boot wheel and a running back. I'm pretty sure that was the first play of the game, Vince, against Florida State. I'm actually going to look that up because I got my play-by-play chart here. But, I'm not going to expose myself to potentially getting smacked that way. Yeah, first play of the game. Here's the play. I got trio left, invert, off right, FQ jet, S wheel. It was a pass, run to the left, drop back was boot caliber. The target was a running back, complete for 15 yards. They hit an S wheel. So that was first play of the game last year. When you do that because the team's being aggressive, or, that's what you do. You think they're going to be aggressive reacting to this. And so with LSU, it was more of receivers. They were going to overplay a receiver running an over route or some kind of vertical route. And so they took advantage of that. So do you really want to put 8 in a box and then you miss the hole? And the next thing you know, Jeremiah Love's off for an 80-yard touchdown run. Is that really how you want to start that game? Or, your corners who are okay, but not great, you really want to put them on an island on the first play of the game in hopes that Riley Leonard's not going to throw the ball over your head? play your base D, feel Notre Dame out, and kind of see what they're going to do. Because I don't know that the other thing too is you got to be careful loading the box against a quarterback that can run right like Riley Leonard.
100%. Because if he gets on the outside, I mean, there was a clip Notre Dame put out yesterday. They put it out, so we can talk about it. But
can't show it because they'll demonetize us. But we can talk about it.
But it was a read option essentially. Then he kept it and he went around the corner, and it was a red zone play. So I mean, it wasn't like he went 80 yards, but he could have. I mean, he got to that edge pretty darn quick, and he looks pretty darn healthy. And I don't mind seeing him run with the football. So
yeah, he was. He looked.
If he gets
that little shake he had on Rod Hurd, and then just raced it, you're like, okay, that's the Riley Leonard that we saw before their injury.
Look, Notre Dame's not stupid. They put that out for a reason, right? They put that out there for a reason.
Well, I think the thing was like good to see it, meaning because I think it was like healthy. He's healthy.
Yeah. 100%.
I think that's what they meant by that. That was my read into it.
There's a lot of layers for me. It was like, okay, clearly Riley Leonard's healthy, and then clearly he is an absolute weapon on this offense. Like, I think it was 2 days ago they put one out of him just throwing a bomb, right? And then today they put one out of him getting the corner and scoring a touchdown. Like, okay, it's Riley Leonard's world. We're all just living in it. Let's go play ball.
Yeah.
Like, I'm ready.
I think that was a real bomb, even though they didn't show the whole play. It wasn't a Colorado darts only. Have you seen that, Vince?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Colorado put this thing out the other day, and it was a picture of Shedeur Sanders throwing a ball, and then they cut to a guy catching the ball on the corner of the end zone. And you're like, that's not the same play. Like, they clearly showed that and then put this other play on it, and it's like it's not saying it was like clearly like garbage. So like they got trolled by like almost every team in college football.
Wow.
Like there was one where it was like Montana or something like that did something where they showed a quarterback in practice on a ball, and then they throw it, and then they clipped it like someone catching a ball in like a real game. And there was another one where somebody put a play from college football 2025, and it was a quarterback throwing a ball into the stands, and then they show a guy catching it deep, it's just they got trolled hard.
Awesome.
Troy put one out like, we actually show completions here. Like it was something like that, like where they showed the whole play, and it just was like, oh my gosh, like they keep doing this to themselves. Like it was 100%. So clearly not the clip that you're showing. It's like, it just makes no sense. Like why? I mean, Shedeur Sanders is very good. You don't need to fake a play like that.
I was just going to say he hasn't made any plays in fall camp that you can't show the full play.
Exactly.
What are you doing?
So it just was just dumb. And they got trolled hard. Like, and it was just like darts only. Like, yeah, maybe, but that ain't it. And the thing is, where the guy caught the ball, if you'd have shown us that play, that would have been impressive because that was a rope, but it's just like, it wasn't that throw. I mean, it's so obvious it wasn't the same play.
The problem was it probably wasn't Shedeur that threw it. That was what I mean?
Maybe. Like it probably was though. I mean, that guy can spin it, I mean,
fair enough.
But maybe, but to your point though, maybe it wasn't him, but you're telling me there's no other throws he's made against that secondary?
They filmed everything because they're all about social media and everything. They filmed every single play. You got nothing else apparently. Wow,
it just didn't make any sense.
That's hilarious that everybody jumped on board with the troll.
Oh, it was great.
It was great. I'm gonna have to look for that stuff now. It's awesome. Aiden Benami, bold prediction: Burnham will be top 1 to 3 best defensive linemen this year.
That's bold, but it's possible.
It's bold, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
It's not crazy bold. It's not like, here's my bright prediction: Bryce Young's gonna have 15 sacks as a true freshman. Like, okay, that's pretty bold. That's pretty, I could see that.
I could too. I'm super high on Josh. I know you are as well. I mean, earlier I was talking about moving him to a different position so he can start. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like, I'm super high on Josh. Top 3 is a very bold prediction because you figure, the 2 interior guys are going to be in the mix for that honor. And so that takes away 2 of those spots. And then you're saying Burnham is the next guy. So there's going to be some competition for that 3rd spot. And so that's a bold prediction, but it would not overly surprise me if it came true. Yeah. He's going to be good, man.
A couple other prediction ones, Vince. Here's another one.
Tommy Guns, who will have the longest play from scrimmage? I'm going with Harrison.
I'm going to go with Jadarian Price. I'm going to surprise. I think people either think Harrison or Jeremiah Love. I'm actually going to go with Jadarian Price. Because normally it's that you're backed up at your own 5, one cut inside zone guy that creases the defense and he's out the gate. Like you think of Josh Adams with an off tackle play in 2015 against Wake Forest. Remember that for 98?
Yep.
You think of Dex on the counter play. I think it might have been Buck Sweep against Virginia Tech back in 2018. It went for 97. It's usually like that's usually, Kyron Williams 90-something yard run. So a lot of times in recent years, the longest plays from scrimmage have been that. I think Notre Dame's longest play from scrimmage last year was Audrick's 80-yard touchdown run against NC State, correct? I know Tyree had a 75-yard touchdown pass. Tobias had a 76-yard touchdown pass. But I'm pretty sure nobody had longer than Audrick's 80-yard run last season. So history's going to tell us it's a running back, and especially since Notre Dame has 2 pretty dynamic, explosive running backs. And I think the easy answer is Jeremiah Love, but I'm going to be a little bit different here and go with Jadarian Price. I just see him against somebody, coming in first and 10, 12 personnel inside zone, backside safety makes a wrong fit, and, Band starts playing like the 50 because it's like, ain't nobody catching him. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's my prediction, Vince.
I'm going to go a little outside the box as well. I'm going to go with Jordan Faison. I think he's got a chance to maybe get the ball in his hands and maybe make, give a little shifty shift and make a couple guys miss and then just go to the house. Because I think if you're ordering the guys that you're worried about on the game plan, if you're a defensive coordinator, right? Jordan Faison's a good player, but he's not going to be at the top. And so I think he might get forgotten a little bit here and there. And maybe when you're backed up against your own end zone and all the attention's over here and you got number 6 over here doing something special, maybe getting to the end zone. So if we're going outside the box, I'll say Jordan Faison.
I dig that. Let's go here.
All right, John A1, when Notre Dame wears Shamrock uniforms and still have the gold helmets, but with a Shamrock emblem on them, do you love it or do you hate it?
I liked it. They did that in 2011. I don't normally – I said this. I don't
whites,
mess with the helmet. I said the one exception was when they just put the Shamrock on it. That's the one exception. And, Vince, I'll tell you what, man, like, normally I don't like that, but that 2011, those alternates with the green stripes on the jerseys and the Shamrock,
those were
loved it
too. Yeah. And when they were at Michigan, like those were the cleanest. I really like those. I'm with you. I was there for those, and I like the helmets, and I thought it was just very clean. I like that with the green stripes and everything. I dug it. I dug those uniforms for sure. And again, I don't like them really messing with the helmets. Some of the helmets have been way too much. And they had the 2 different tones on each side, and they're doing some crazy stuff with the helmet. That's too much for me. Keep it simple. If you want to just put a Shamrock on there, cool. But other than that, every uniform will look good with Notre Dame's gold helmets. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think so, then you're probably not as big of a fan as you should be.
People are allowed to have difference of opinions without them being less of fans.
Nope, not allowed.
Yes. Remember what you said earlier, Vince? It's my show. I make the rules.
All right. Fine. Oh, there's another one up here.
There's another question. We're not done.
I was too busy in my feels about the fact that I just got shut down by my boss. Sorry. Ant VR. I watched the Bush Push game the other night. Why do you do that to yourself? I was also at the OSU game last year. 2 brutal outcomes. Which one do you think was harder to swallow?
Is the Ohio State game for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Here's why. Okay. Because USC was the better football team. Notre Dame played out of their minds that day. Like, USC was better than Notre Dame. They had more talent. They just were better than Notre Dame. Notre Dame just everything went right for Notre Dame for the most part. Now, there was some, the Anthony Fasano getting stripped from behind, but like even in that game was just kind of like, wow, you guys really brought it. And I look at last year's win, that one was harder to swallow because like they were not better than you. Like, you should not have lost that game. Like, the USC game was like, dude, that was a phenomenal game. Like, what can you do? They had Reggie Bush and you didn't. I mean, they had they had 2 Heisman Trophy winners on the field that day, Vince. Reggie won it that year, and then Matt Leinart won it the year before.
Yeah.
Oh, and, 100%. Just like you think of all the big time it was an amazing game. It sucked. The ending sucked, but it was one of those things where like you just watch it like, dude, I'm glad I watched that game. That was a phenomenal game. I felt such disgust coming out of the Ohio State game because you're like, you had no business losing that game. None. So that's why, to me, the Ohio State game is harder to swallow. And the other thing, too, is Notre Dame was still undefeated when they lost to Ohio State. They still controlled their own destiny. Like, it's, well, but they lost Louisville. Who knows if they might have been more up for the Louisville game if they were still undefeated. They might have been more up for the Texas game if they were coming off of a win. Ohio State. We don't know the answer to that, but I do know that they had already lost a game in 2005. They had already lost to Michigan State at home. And that team had flaws, in my opinion, that were going to keep it from, winning the ultimate prize. That was a heck of a football team, man. But last year, just watching them lose that game to a team that they just flat out should have beat was just pissed me off. It was the USC game was disappointing because you had that chance to win the game. It was heartbreaking to lose that game. Last year's game pissed me off, and that's why for me it was harder to swallow. The gut punch was more so in the USC game because, again, I was more of a fan at the time. I wasn't covering the team. But, like, harder to swallow, definitely Ohio State last year for me. Definitely was.
I play with my emotions. I'm an emotional dude, and I was on the sidelines at the end of the USC game when all that went down. And, the team rushed the field when they thought that Notre Dame won, when Matt Leinart, rolled to the left and you see the ball pop out in the air and you're like, game over. This is fantastic. They just did it. This is unbelievable. It was an unbelievable crowd. It was one of the first night games, it was a night game atmosphere. I mean, it was unbelievable. I was probably out to the hash before, they started blowing whistles and telling everybody to get back on the sideline. So like going from a complete elation to then going back on the sideline and then watching the Bush push and how that ended to just utter despair. My young heart at the time couldn't handle it. You know what I mean? And like that one has lived with me since that moment. So that's why it was harder to swallow for me, because I was not too emotionally invested, but more emotionally invested. Now, if he would have said like 2 years ago, Ohio State game, like that one hit me to the core too. I mean, walking out of Ohio Stadium,
but that was as much because of what we had to go through to get into the stadium as it was anything else. You were pretty grumpy going into the game.
I was salty. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But
I don't think it was as much. But I mean, they lost by 11 points.
Yeah, I still felt like they had a chance to win that game. But either way, it's the USC game still, regardless of which Ohio State game we're talking about. And I was like, that one stung. Like I knew the date of that game for like a really long time, and like that one stung.
I get that
a lot. Yeah,
I get that. I get that.
Yeah. Tyler Evans, thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate you. Is it harder to block pass rush on the outside or inside, in your opinion, and why?
I mean, it depends on the player you're going against. Like, look, my answer would say, okay, edge. Okay, but we're playing the Rams this week and we got to block Aaron Donald. It's a little different, or it's inside, but okay, we're playing, I'm trying to think of modern players. Is J.J. Watt still in the NFL? I really don't watch NFL. I know Aaron Donald retired this offseason, but like, T.J. Watt, how about that? T.J. still in the NFL.
Yeah, or Aiden Hutchinson's on the outside.
Von Miller in his heyday. It just depends on the player. To me, I would say I'd probably lean towards outside, because I just feel like outside there's more things you can do to protect against an outside rush, move the pocket, chip, have the back help, fan, slide, where it can be harder to kind of handle a really good inside pass rush because of everything they can do off of it. Look, I have trouble. Well, you can double team that guy, but then how do you handle the stunt? How do you handle, that guy's crashing into your double team and they're bringing a really athletic guy around, or he's crashing that double team. You're having a hard time blocking him, and they're having a run through from their Mike or their Will or a safety or something like that. It's just, it's a challenge for me. If they're good, if a team's good at it, I think a really good inside pass rush can be more challenging than an outside pass rush. And I think Al Golden's figured that out, because that's why they very much bring a big chunk of their pressures right up in the face of the quarterback. So
it's harder to deal with as a quarterback, I think, when it's right in your face, and they talk about the blind side all the time, and it's super important. Don't get me wrong, but the blind side is blind. You don't see it coming, so you at least have an opportunity to make a play and push the ball down the field or get rid of the ball and things like that. When that rush is in your face, you're automatically bailing and trying to figure stuff out. You know what I mean? And so I agree. I think for a quarterback, an interior rush is so much harder to deal with.
Agree.
Mark 1, thanks for the super chat, man. Really appreciate it. See, the coach is high on Love. Have you seen his pass catching ability plus routes? See why in the first home game flying in? Oh, because he's coming in for the first home game, so he wants to know if Love is going to be good catching the ball. Got it.
Yeah, he's very good catching the ball. I'm not going to get into routes that we've seen him run. It's just I'm not going to give that away. But yes, we've seen him catch the ball quite a bit.
I mean, look, all you need to know is the fact that they've been having him work at slot as well. And
not in fall camp, not so far this year.
Right, but
I mean spring, but yeah.
But they have done it in the past, and so they obviously know he can catch that. That's all. That's the only point that I was making on that. Yeah, is that he has the ability to catch the ball for sure.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be shocked if he's not catching the ball in the opener, for sure.
Oh, me too. Big time. For sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Salty Virginia Peanuts. Is Boubacar Traore on pace to have starter minutes? And if not, what is holding him back?
Just overall consistency, being more than just a pass rusher. You know, like right now, Vince, there's no doubt he's going to be a pass rusher. The question is, are you going to have him in on first and second down as well? That's the question. Just this being a more consistent and complete player. You know, does he have the repertoire to do more than just rush off the edge with speed, you know, or a straight pure power move? Does he have counters? You know, his game is still evolving in a lot of ways. Because he was hurt his senior year, didn't play a whole lot of senior year either. So he hasn't played a lot of football the last 2 years. And so I just think it's the nuance and the consistency as a player. I think those are keys.
That's fair.
Yeah. Henry Reese asks, what you doing for the Georgia Tech game, B? I don't know yet, Henry, to be honest with you. I hadn't really thought about it. I normally don't do stuff on road games.
Yeah.
It's just because, you know, traveling and getting work done. But if it's a night game, I'm more open to here's how I'm at road games. If y'all are doing a tailgate at a road game, I'll come by. It's just there's no way I can coordinate that kind of thing. And we'll do like get-togethers for bowl games because I have a lot more time to prepare for it.
Oh yeah. Well, we're down there for more days usually too for a bowl game. You know what I mean? So there's more of an opportunity. Yeah.
And that stuff's a lot of fun. But I haven't planned anything. If you guys are doing something, let me know. And yeah, I'll let you guys know. I'll try my best to be out there, and especially if it's a night game. Like those noon games are tough because it's like, you know, I'm up in the press box by 10.
Yeah,
you know,
get up
at
and
the
go.
latest.
I mean,
yeah, for sure. All right, let's go here.
Guinea pig clips. Out of the receivers on the roster, who is most likely to be the go-to guy this year?
I don't know that that's established yet, Guinea pig, honestly. I mean, you could make a case for Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell, one of those two transfers. You could make a case for Jaden Greathouse, honestly. And I think it's going to be more of they don't have a go-to, but the ball gets spread around a lot more.
I hope that's the case. Anyway.
I think it's going to be more of that than it will be like last year, Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors both put up great numbers, but it's very clear that Malik Neighbors was the go-to. I don't know if anyone's going to emerge like Malik Neighbors did. Will Fuller did in 2015. I don't know if they're going to have that, but it would most likely be one of those three guys. If I had to lean towards anybody, if I had to pick one now, I'd probably pick Jaden Greathouse, but I'm not ready to go there now because I think those other guys are going to be really good players. And because I know of the makeup of the Mike Denbrock offense is to spread the ball around a lot. So, yeah. Yep.
Tyler Almany, who is the most important offensive and defensive player that is projected to be a non-starter to Notre Dame having a successful season?
Well, I mean, offensively, it's going to be one of the backup skill players. It's either going to be Jadarian Price or a Jordan Faison, Jaden Thomas type of guy.
Yep. Price was my first guy.
Or Bo Collins if Jaden Thomas is starting. It'll be somebody like that. There's going to be a fourth receiver that's really good. Jordan Faison, Jadarian Price at running back is probably, the one I would lean towards because, he could technically be a non-starter and rush for 1,000 yards this year. We've talked about that and some of the buy-sell holds we've gotten asked that. So defensively, again, part of it depends on who starts and who doesn't start. I think overall, Vince, I want to say one thing. I think Josh Burnham is probably where I would lean for that one.
That's a good one.
But I just want to say this. There's for a lot of reasons, we need to get away from as fans at non-offensive line quarterback positions of obsessing on who the starter is because it doesn't matter as much as it used to because they're going to play – like somebody was like, how can Deion Colsey be on the third team if they also have Micah Gilbert, Bo Collins, and Jaden Thomas there? I said, because he's working with the third team because those three guys are all rotating in between the first and second team.
Right.
And, if you talk about it's not how it used to be where it's like, okay, you're getting all the first team reps, you're getting all the second team reps. It's like these 6 receivers are working with the first and second team. I've seen Bo Collins on the first team and the second team. I've seen Jaden Thomas on the first team and the second team. I've seen Micah Gilbert on the first team and the second team. I've seen Jordan Faison on the first team and the second team. I've seen Jaden Harrison with the first team and the second team. I've seen KK Smith with the first team and the second team. Stuff doesn't matter. I've seen Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love lining up at running back with the first team offense. So, and the same thing's true on the D line, Vince, at defensive end. It doesn't matter who starts between Josh Burnham and RJ Oben or Bryce Young because they're all going to play. Some games they may, because of the package, it may be RJ Oben.
Sure.
But I don't care as much about that kind of stuff. Now, what that means for this kind of question is because you're going to see more guys, there's a lot more options of, who's going to be that guy. But most important defensively, I pick one of the defensive players that doesn't start. Let's just go younger guys. It's Burnham and Boubacar to me. One of those two guys has to step up and give you an edge rush. When it comes to importance, it has to be one of those two guys. So that'd be my answer there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because the defensive line guys are going to get a bunch of snaps. And so they're going to have the most opportunity to be impactful on Notre Dame's season. And I think that's a really good call. And like I said before, Jadarian Price was my guy offensively. Again, you could go with a number of receivers, and I totally get that. And it's not a wrong answer. I just think Jadarian Price is going to be special. And I'm not sure he's ever going to quote unquote start, right? And it makes it just an easy choice because he's going to be so good, Brian. I'm really excited about him.
Yeah.
Timeout, Tom. Sullivan Absher did some good things during spring. Does Notre Dame have too many quality offensive linemen considering each starter? Jagasaw has at least 2 years of eligibility. Does Absher have a future at Notre Dame?
There's no such thing. First of all, he's a redshirt freshman, right? Like he's got 4 years of eligibility left right now. So of course he has a future at Notre Dame. That's not even a question. You also have 2 seniors ahead of him at left guard right now. They're 2 years older than him. So there's going to be at least 2 years where those guys are gone. And Billy Strouth is older than him at guard, just a guard. And the starting right tackle and the starting left tackle, based on what we think they're going to be right now, are all older than him. So five, and Ashton Craig is – so 5 spots are going to come open before he goes into a senior season. So, of course, he has a future at Notre Dame. That doesn't mean he's going to start because they're very talented and somebody may beat him out. But I'll be shocked if someday Sullivan Absher's not a starter. Not everybody starts as a freshman or a redshirt freshman. Mike McGlinchey's first start did not come until the end of his – I think it was 14, 15, 16. So end of his redshirt freshman season against LSU. It was the first time Mike McGlinchey played a meaningful down. Sullivan's got a long way to go to get to that point in time, right? Like we haven't even started the first game. So the other part too is does Notre Dame have too many good quality offensive line? Heck no.
There's no such thing.
Possible.
There's no such thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not.
Domer, Texas 22. Do teams get any type of medical evaluation on players if an NIL deal is involved in the transfer? For example, did Notre Dame know Leonard needed ankle cleanup before the deal was done?
I mean, they knew it was a possibility. He had surgery on his ankle. There's always a possibility that you're going to need some cleanup on it. That's just kind of I'll say normal thing, but thing that happens more than maybe people think that it does. But this isn't a contract. Like this isn't you're signing a 4-year deal for however much with an NFL team, and you've got to
kind of
pass
thing.
physicals. Yeah. I mean, you're enticing a kid to come play for you if that's in fact what you choose to do. You're paying that kid to do. That's what you're paying the kid to do. It's no different than saying like, well, what if he gets beat out? Well, okay, you still agreed to pay him whatever you agreed to pay him. So, no,
I mean, they do. Like, if the question is asking, do they do research on kids' medical histories? Of course they do. I mean, they know what they're getting themselves into, without being able to predict the future, right? Because I don't think anybody would have thought that he would have had to redo what they already did. I don't think anybody thought that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they did, and it is what it is. But yeah, once you make promises to somebody, it's the honorable thing to keep those promises. I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, if you try to strong arm a kid into, you don't get this, if that, the other thing, then he's going to be like, all right, cool. I understand. I'm going to go sign with somebody else.
Deuces. Yeah. I'm out. Yeah.
Yep. So now that doesn't mean that it's like the thing with that is if you feel that there's a concern with him being injured, he may just not be the quarterback for you to even go get in the portal, period.
Yeah, if you've got those kind of reservations, that's a good call.
So again, do those conversations happen? Sure. Is there a negotiation about what you may or may not get paid if you rankle? No, I don't think that's the case.
Bubs, any concern that this year's offensive line hamstrings the offense in the way the 21 line did for that team?
Sure, I'm concerned about that it might happen. I think it's a lot less likely that it'll happen than in 2021, but it's certainly a concern. I don't think this line's going to be as bad as that line. Not even close.
Right.
But it's like, but the question is, but will it be good enough for them to win a championship? That's the question. Because I mean, that team in 2021 went 11-1. I mean, it's not like they were a terrible team. The schedule wasn't very tough, but you get the point I'm making, Vince. It's a concern. Now, people are concerned about, well, yeah, Tosh Baker looked really bad in 2021. Okay, are we to believe that Tosh Baker hasn't gotten any better in 3 years? Like, you think he's still the same guy he wasn't? Right. Yeah, but he got beat out by a first-round draft pick and a second-round draft pick. And a 5-star guy, beat him out at left tackle this offseason, and a really talented guy with 5-star upside beat him out at right tackle just because he got beat out. Those are all true things. He got beat out by Emil Wagner. That still doesn't mean he can't play. All right, because again, you're O-line. You've recruited really talented players, but again, it's left guards is still a question mark for different reasons. So yeah, it's a concern. It would be very homerish of me to say not at all concerned about the O-line holding this team back. Not at all. Okay, well, hope that helps you sleep better at night, but that's not honest evaluation. Now, am I as concerned about it now as I was then going into the season? No, I'm not. I'm not as concerned about it as I was then because flat out going into 2021, there just were some guys that I didn't think could play or were at positions that I didn't think they should be playing. So going into 2021, I just didn't think Kane Madden was any good. I mean, I even had a Notre Dame coach call me about that and kind of was not happy that I had said that publicly. True story. And he understood where I was coming from by the end of the conversation because once again, he was told something that I said that wasn't true. And that's what happens anytime I ever have a Notre Dame coach reach out to me about something I said. It's because someone told him I said something that I didn't say or left out a lot of context. And the conversation was, well, we need to hit the portal. I said, I understand that. Because remember, that's the year they were trying to go after that kid from Tulsa, the corner from Tulsa. I was happy about him. And there was another kid that they got that year. And I was like, I'm very happy about that. I'm all for the portal. I don't think he can play. That's the difference. And you knew they brought him in here to play. Like he wasn't like, well, he's going to battle. No, he's not. He's coming in here to start. And I just think he can play. I was very concerned about Zeke Correll at guard. I think Zeke was a center. I was concerned about him at guard. You had a true freshman in Blake Fisher, who I thought was talented, but he's still a true freshman starting at left tackle. And that was a concern. And then, of course, he gets hurt and it becomes a problem. Josh Lugg is a guy that I thought could be steady, and he was pretty steady that year. I thought Josh was solid. But just overall, talent-wise, I was concerned about that team. Jarrett Patterson was really the only known commodity that you had going into that year. And he was coming off of a season-ending injury from the previous year. So I'm not as concerned about this group. I mean, look, Billy Schrouth versus Kane Madden, huge advantage at right guard. Ashton Craig at Jarrett Patterson. I mean, Jarrett was more experienced. Ashton's healthier, a little bit more talented, in my opinion. Fifth-year senior version of Tosh Baker versus redshirt freshman version of Tosh Baker, or true freshman version of Blake Fisher. Similar. Emil Wagner to Josh Lugg at right tackle. Josh is more proven. Emil's more talented. And then left guard, it's a wash, if not better now. But now you've got young guys like Sullivan Absher coming along, because that's partly why they had to go get Kane Madden, is because they hadn't recruited the position all that well, and they needed that kind of guy to go out there. At least they felt they did. And that's not as much of a concern now. So
would you also say that your concern level is a little bit lower based on who's playing quarterback, since you've got a little bit more
big
of a
time
guy? Okay.
Because I love Jack Cohn, but Jack Cohn was not moving around in the pocket.
Exactly. And he was a sitting
and that's
duck.
what happened against Wisconsin. That's what happened against Cincinnati. They put pressure on him, and they could not block him, and there was nothing Jack could do about it.
Right. If they could have blocked him, Jack would have been fine, but he's not going to be able to escape.
He would have ripped those teams up.
Will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he couldn't, and whereas Riley, it's like, okay, he can do more damage, and there's things you can do to neutralize that pass rush with his legs. There's things like some of your biggest runs this year may be on plays where you're not asking your offensive line to block for the run at all. That's what a read zone is. You're blocking for the inside zone, and Riley's doing his thing over here. Your blocking is not dependent on Riley Leonard making certain plays.
Right.
You're running jet sweeps, power read with jet sweep action. You're not dependent upon the offensive line to make that play go if it's a give. There's things like that can help as well. The offense is better suited at the quarterback level and from a leadership level to thrive if the offensive line isn't great. Because, look, we saw Mike Denbrock have a pretty good offense 2 years ago with an offensive line that wasn't very good.
That's something I go to a lot. The LSU offensive line wasn't exactly winning the Joe Moore Award every year, right? I mean,
2 years ago they weren't. Last year they were pretty decent. But yeah, you're correct, though. You're absolutely correct.
I trust the offensive coordinator to know what he's got and to scheme around that if necessary, or to scheme towards that if necessary, right? So that's also a big part of it for me.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's get to a few more before we get out of here, Vince. Speaking of Riley Leonard, let's get to this one.
All right, from Bob Alvey, what does Riley Leonard's pass efficiency rating need to be for Notre Dame's offense to score 28 points against the 4 toughest opponents?
I think part of what makes Riley Leonard so impactful is that you don't need him to have X quarterback rating. It's like, go look at the Clemson game last year. As I said, if you're just looking at this from a passing standpoint, you miss out on what makes this guy so good. And against Clemson last year, a game that they won by 21 points, Riley Leonard against Duke, he went 17 of 33, 175 yards, only completed 51.5% of his throws, had no touchdown passes, no interceptions, only 5.83 yards per attempt, and had 96.1% passer rating. And they won by 21 points. Now, part of it was, the turnovers by Clemson and all that, but like Riley Leonard in that game also went out and ran the ball 8 times for 98 yards and had a 3rd and short touchdown that he took about 50 yards because he broke several tackles in the backfield and then outran the Clemson defense into the end zone. Like you missed that. So you say, well, he only passed for 175 yards. Yeah, but look at what he did from an offensive standpoint. Look what he did from a total standpoint, and I think that's what people miss a little bit. He had 273 yards of total offense because he can run. And last I checked, touchdowns for a quarterback from a pass count as many points as a touchdown from a run.
True.
And yards that you get running are count the same as yards pass. So what I mean, Vince, is if you run for 20 yards, it counts the same as if you pass for 20 yards.
Last time I checked.
Okay, I'm a little sarcasm there. But
there needs to be and I don't even know how you would even go about it, but there almost needs to be like an offensive efficiency rating or whatever.
There needs to be an offensive playmaking rating.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what needs to be. Because to a degree, there is an offensive efficiency rating. You can look at his yards per attempt and then in his yards per carry and things like that. Man, it's a pretty bad yards per attempt average against, Clemson. You only threw the ball for 5.3 yards per carry, but yeah, he averaged 12.3 on as a runner. And 6.7 as a play. Right. So, you want him to be better in that regard. You definitely want him to be better than what he was against Clemson. But the other thing that I always say is, but he's also going to have a much better supporting cast than he had at Clemson. And that's the thing that you got to look at and say, what kind of impact is he having from a yards per play standpoint? So for example, Riley Leonard against Clemson last year, if you look at like just total offense, averaged 6.7 yards per play. Jaden Daniels last year, the Heisman Trophy winner, did not have a better percentage than that until game 6 against Missouri, where he was 8.7. Now, after that, he kind of took off, right? But so did Riley. He was 9.3 against Lafayette, 9.6 against Northwestern. And so that's the thing, as you look at, is there's a lot of different ways to evaluate effectiveness from a quarterback. And when you're talking about evaluating Riley Leonard compared to how you're going to evaluate Sam Hartman, you're going to evaluate them very differently. I'd be willing to give you, look, Sam's got to complete at least 65% of his passes. You got to be, well above 8.4 yards per pass attempt. And in the red zone, you've got to do this, this, and this. Riley Leonard could go 15 of 28 against Florida State for 175 yards, and they win that game by 2 touchdowns because he went out there and ran for 75 yards on 11 carries. And because you were worried about him, you missed, you were late getting into that inside zone run that on a read zone concept where he gave, and Jeremiah Love runs for a 50-yard touchdown because your backside player was so focused on stopping Riley Leonard that he couldn't get to that. That never happens. Like somebody was asking me, like, how are they going to be in short yardage without Audric Estime? And we got to talking about the run game. And I'm like, how many times did you see Audric Estime get tackled? Because they just crashed a dude off the backside of the line. And there's nothing Notre Dame could do about it. That's not a problem with Riley Leonard, because if you try that mess against Notre Dame now, he's pulling that ball and he's out the gate. It's strike up the band. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's like you have to defend them completely differently now than you did before. And so now I would like for him in those games to do both, be efficient throwing the ball
100%.
And have a quarterback rating over 150 and also run the ball, for 50 plus yards and a touchdown. That's ideal, but it just comes down to, he's got to make plays. That's the thing that Riley's got. He's got to make plays. He's got to make plays with his legs. He's got to make plays with his arm, and he's got to make plays on third down. That's really what it comes down to. And you're just going to evaluate him way differently than you evaluated Sam Hartman, Jack Cohn, and even Ian Book, because a lot of Ian Book's production as a runner were on scrambles in the pass
scrambles
game.
Yeah,
where Riley Leonard's going to make yards as a runner, like as a
like a call and run,
right?
Yeah,
and you're going to defend that way differently. I mean, the last time Notre Dame had a quarterback that you had to account for his legs like Riley Leonard was Brandon Wimbush, and Riley Leonard's a much better passer than what Brandon Wimbush was in 2017.
Right.
Much better. And now think about that. Think about what that offense would have been like with a quarterback that could not only run like Brandon, and Riley can run like Brandon. He's faster than Brandon. He averaged more yards per carry than Brandon, but he can throw the ball for a 62 to 63% completion rate, which is where Riley was before his injury to Notre Dame. People say, well, he only completed 57. Go look at what his completion percentage was before he got hurt against Notre Dame. It was like 62.7. That's 13 points higher than what Brandon Wimbush, 14 points higher than what Brandon Wimbush was. And so it's just a different animal, and he's going to have way better receiving core. Now the line won't be as good, but everything else is going to be as good, if not better. So those are things to look at, Bob. It's a very fair question. It really is. But you just got to evaluate Riley Leonard differently. Now, what I hope to see from him, I want to, like I said, I want to see him be at least a 150 passer rating, and at least 65% completion, and at least 8.5 yards per attempt. That's the ideal. So that's the ideal numbers for me to say, hey, throwing the ball wise, Riley was able to go out there and do what he needed to do to beat that team, 100%. So I'll give you the numbers, but I think unlike past quarterbacks, he doesn't have to be there to do enough to win. And that's one thing that's a little bit different. All right, let's get to a couple more events before we get out of here. Here's a good one.
W.O. Lewis. Which team in the preseason top 10 or 15 will not be ranked by the end of the season?
Let's go look at the coaches poll, Vince. I want to pull up let me go to the ESPN, I believe, has the rankings here. So let's go pull up the old coaches poll. Top 15. So Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3, Texas 4, Bama 5, Ole Miss 6, Notre Dame 7, Michigan 8. That's 1. Penn State 9, Florida State 10, Missouri 11, LSU 12, Utah 13, Clemson 14, Tennessee 15. The team in there that I would say has the best chance to finish unranked this year would be Michigan of those top 15 teams. That I would, and then second for me would probably be Missouri. Yep. Now, if Cameron Rising gets hurt at quarterback, you can put Utah into that conversation. Sure. But those would be my 3 most likely teams that don't finish ranked that are in the top 15. Top 10 to 15.
As you were reading through them, those are the ones that stuck out to me. And it's not just because of my Michigan hatred. I'm putting that to the side for right now. But it's also because I just think they're going to take a step back with all the stuff that's happening off the field. You've got, a lot of those guys graduated. You got a new coaching staff. You got a much harder schedule than you did last year. And they're not going to have the advantages that they had the year before. I think they're going to take a major step back. And
I agree, Vince. All right, let's get to here we go. Here's one from IL Irish 82.
Not Notre Dame related, but thoughts on Michigan naming Harbaugh honorary captain.
I didn't think that was real. I literally had to look that up. I was like, there's no way
Seriously?
they did that. They named him the honorary captain for the opener against Fresno State. That is such a slap in the face to the NCAA. And this is the thing, is like nobody respects you anymore, right? Like, like I would find something to hammer Michigan for. Like That is such a we don't care that we cheated, and it's nothing you can do about it. And there's not. It's typical of that program. It's a scumbag program.
Right.
They cheat. Like, here's the thing. Let me say this, Vince. The reason I'm so pissed about this, like, schools do things all the time. I'm going to try to steal your signals in the middle of a game. I'm going to try to figure it out, and if you're dumb enough it's just part of it. If you send me film and I can see your signals on the film and you use the same signals, I'm not going to feel bad for learning those signals. Right. If you leave behind your play sheet, on the Friday walkthrough, that's on you. You know what I mean? Like, I probably wouldn't use it, but like, that's kind of on you. There's all types of things you do to try to gain an advantage that are within the rules and within the levels of sportsmanship. What Michigan did was so blatantly disrespectful to the game that I can't say, well, it worked. I don't care that it worked. I really don't care that it worked. I don't want to win that bad, that I'm willing to knowingly cheat and cheat the game, cheat my fans, cheat the sport as a whole. It disgusts me. And for them to be so unapologetic about it and flaunt this type of thing, like, nah, man, that's
literally unapologetic with what Harbaugh just said the other day. He's like, I'm not apologizing for anything. I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Like, you were caught red-handed. Your hand was in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
You had crumbs on your mouth. Like, you are guilty.
Right. Well, for the cheating thing, they actually have said that, like, there's no evidence that he knew, but it seems like he purposely
absolutely
removed himself from that. There's no way he didn't know something's going on, but no one could say, hey, this is like, I told him this. He told me exactly. It's ignorance is bliss kind of thing. But for Michigan to do that, just
it's just look, Brian, them and their fan base, they're all in on this. They don't even care that they got in trouble, and they don't care that they cheated. They don't care. They got
I've
what they
seen
wanted.
Michigan fans not even, like, at first they were like, no, we didn't cheat. And then it was like, so what? Don't get mad at us, because it's just like,
don't be mad. We got the trophy. That's why you're mad. Like,
no, I'm not. I don't really care about that.
Has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So, but they're all good. Like, they literally sold their soul to get the championship, and they have no qualms about it. And that's messed up, man.
Yeah. They are. It's just, it's disgusting. It really is disgusting,
to say the least.
Yeah, I just, man, oh man. I'm going to answer this last question, Vince, and then we got to run.
Spark 5219 will be ready offensively, defensively, and special teams. How do you get ready for 100-degree temperature and oppressive humidity?
Well, at the end of the day, Vince, there's no way to prepare for it. Just specifically, there's no way for you to have 100-degree temperature and
Right. You can't pump that into the indoor facility with the humidity.
No.
Like that's just
Because
not
if somebody
reality.
got sick, you'd get sued like crazy.
That's just not realistic. Yeah.
What you do is you just do what you can to trying to think of a way to say this.
Hydrate.
You just make sure you're in the best shape that you can possibly, and you push yourselves a little harder in the 2 weeks leading up to fall to that game. You know, hey, we're going to push ourselves a little bit more. We're going to run a little bit more. We're going to push the tempo a little bit more. We're going to practice a little bit harder. Just so you're in great shape. And then during that day, here's the key about hydration. If you wait till the day of a game or right before the game start hydrating, you're done. It's about your meal, like what you're putting in your body that whole week. And you're making sure you're hydrating like crazy that whole week. Because if you wait till before the game to get something, some little tablet or water or Gatorade before warm, you're going to be cramping like crazy. Your body needs to be hydrated for the entire week, and that's really what this stuff kind of boils down to is it's your plan for dealing with that has to be long-term,
correct.
In a lot, including the hydration part. Now, the thing that's good is that it is a 7:30 kickoff. So it won't be as hot, even during warm-ups, which start around 6. It still won't be as hot as it would be if you were playing like a 3 o'clock game. That's just,
Yeah, but it's all about the hydration and then the recovery and all of those different things that you do for those 2 weeks, right? I would start all that stuff 2 weeks ahead of time, right? It's your recovery. It's the the fueling your body properly, getting all the hydration, doing all of that. That's all you can do. I mean, like you said, you can't replicate that temperature. Right. And anybody that's like, well, they're not doing what they need to be doing, they're not you can't. That's not that's not realistic, right? Maybe you go down a day early, to help kind of get acclimated to the temperatures. I wouldn't have a problem with that, depending on class schedules and things like that. So, maybe you go down a little bit early, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you prep leading up to it and you hope you did all the right things and you're all in the same environment and you go and may the better man win. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Football's not about being comfortable. How about that? That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. So Vince, that'll do it, man.
Okay.
There's still a lot of questions we didn't get to, but are, Vince has got to roll and we are out of time, but
we're up against it.
Sorry to all those. If you're a message board member, go to the message board, leave your questions there. We need to have like a post mailbag message board post where people ask the questions we didn't get to. And then also there's the film breakdown and the stats breakdown on the site for the Notre Dame pass game that you'll definitely want to check out. That's a message board only thing. So why don't you go and take us out of here, Vince?
That's right. So get on the boards at irishbreakdown.com. And as Matt D says, hit the like button, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss a live show. There's a good chance that there's going to be a show tomorrow afternoon, Brian. And of course, we're going to talk about that, but you're not going to know that unless you hit the notification bell. And then you'll be able to join us on an odd Saturday afternoon. So make sure you stick with us. Thanks for hanging out with us this entire time. I love Mailbag Fridays. This is my last one because I get to go back to school next week. Yippee for me. And but this is my favorite day of the week, and you guys made it special, and I appreciate that. And looking forward to what this season has, man. This is going to be a lot of fun. Got a few more afternoon shows next week before I end up going back. So make sure you stay tuned. But again, there might be a show tomorrow afternoon. So hit that notification bell so that
there will be, because we have practice availability tomorrow. So it's not
fair enough.
You're saying that people don't think there's going to be some commitment or something like that.
That's not what I
know. That may happen too, but we have practice availability tomorrow. So we will have a show tomorrow for sure.
100%. So we'll let you know how practice went and maybe do a little bit more as well. So for Brian, I'm Vince. Thanks you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.